When Lancashire police receive a call about a heist worth a staggering £100 million, detectives were to unravel a truly bizarre conspiracy by a bunch of bungling amateurs. A man who had virtually nothing was seen in the local pubs buying brand new Mercedes cars for literal strangers. £5,000 gift cards handed to the homeless in the street before he decides to jet off to Dubai to purchase a £500,000 villa from Russian mobsters. But as he tries to pull his equally poor friends out of poverty, the story takes an unexpected turn. And where exactly did this money come from?
In the faded glamour of a British seaside town, a man sits alone in a shabby bedroom. It's cold and damp. Almost every house around here has black mould. The only light comes from his computer screen. This is where we find James Parker. Mid-50s, wispy grey beard, living on benefits. Hour after hour, day after day, he sits here, clicking through websites, solving tedious little puzzles because he thinks he'll win a reward. The smoke from another rolled cigarette hangs in the air. To anyone looking in, this was just another life being lived in quiet desperation. In Britain's most deprived town, where men have the shortest lives in the country. But then, one day, James Parker notices something. Something that shouldn't be possible. He stares at the screen. What he's seeing, it can't be real. But it is. James Parker, a man who has very little, has just stumbled upon something that would give him everything. A secret that will change his life forever and drag those close to him down a path none of them could have predicted. Some secrets make you rich, some secrets destroy you. This one does both. Let me start all of this by welcoming you to, in a way, one of the main characters of this story. Blackpool. A big, bold, yes, brashy, northern seaside town where Britain comes to let it all hang out. Even if you've never been here, you can imagine it perfectly. Miles of sandy beach, amusement arcades, candy floss, ice cream. It's got it all. The quintessential English seaside town. And who needs Uber when you can just hop on a donkey ride?
White 7 and 373. Yes, we do the cheapest. White line 6 and 464.
And it is a very, very familiar sight to me because I spent so many of my own childhoods wandering along with a sense of wanderlust for this place as a kid. And it is just so evocative. The smells of it, the hot dogs, the chips, absolutely soaked in vinegar, donuts absolutely covered with sugar. It is so wonderful.
In its heyday, it was the destination for millions who flocked to see the town's famous tower and its incredible winter light show, the illuminations.
So the minute you do switch that switch, the whole of the pier is going to light up.
Nowadays, its reputation is perhaps a little more checkered. If I'm honest, it's a place that doesn't always make sense. A place full of grandeur, albeit often faded and phased, which is next to the gaudiest of tat, where true poverty, some of the very worst in Britain, somehow seems to sustain a noisy economy, which rain or shine never quite stops, always somehow keeps going. So, the perfect place to live, I suppose, for a man that doesn't quite make sense. The man at the centre of this story, a man called James Parker.
Did you ever hear about the Blackpool Bitcoin millionaire?
Yeah, I did, yeah.
You hear tales of him everywhere, and you know what they say? Well, some of them are true.
Talk of the town, wasn't it?
As you walk down the seafront.
It's one of those very folklores around
It's like
here.
a folklore, it's almost like a legend, a bit of a legend. Like, yeah.
In certain circles, yeah.
In the pubs.
18 months, 2 years ago, we were having a quiet drink one night in Wetherspoons. We got chatting to this guy, and he came out with this tale about him being a guru on Bitcoins.
It seems everyone has got a story to tell or half a memory of James Parker. And the story usually goes something like this. He looked totally unremarkable, a kind of crumpled silver surfer, but it seemed like he was a man of limitless means, able to throw cash around to anyone if they were even so much as nice to him, even for a moment. No one quite knew what to make of it. There are, though, a handful of people that know more than anyone about this elusive man, because they were there right from the beginning. I've dropped round to meet two of his close friends.
Maybe we could just start by just going over the moment when James first came into your lives.
In a pub, maybe. I've known him for years. And I used to go around his house for cups of tea. I knew some of his other friends, do you know what I mean? We'd just socialise and I'd take him shopping and that. Poor little James used to come up to my house on a mobility scooter, wearing rubber gloves in the rain. He was a right comical little character.
Like, we struggled to get him out of the house, didn't we? Before everything.
When he got the mobility scooter, that was, I don't know if he loved it. He could get out and about. That sort of changed things quite a lot, didn't it?
I remember him letting me drive it and just shouting, "Right now!" because it was on dead fast.
Also huddled here on Amy's sofa is her good friend Loretta, a bit younger than Amy, but who also knocked about with James.
The first time I met James, he was struggling with his bags, so I helped him in with them, made him a cup of tea, made him sit down, catch his breath again, and just sort of started looking after him from there.
Can you remember what your first impression of him was when you saw him that day when you met him?
Just a frail old man. He was just fragile, wasn't he?
Yeah.
A proper frail old man. It just needed some help. And he was all on his own too.
So it was completely accidental?
Yeah.
Just ran into him one day?
I won't call it an accident because I believe that everyone has their own path. I just think that me and him were supposed to cross.
James Parker couldn't easily walk 100 yards. He was jobless and he lived on benefits. Still, with Loretta and Amy, he did have friendship.
James would come in the front room when I was asleep on the couch and throw a quilt over me. Like, rub my head on his way out.
No, he treated her as his daughter.
He was brilliant.
Yeah.
He was part of the family.
He was part of the family, wasn't he?
And though he didn't have much, he had dreams. Big dreams.
Do you remember when he got them chakra stones and he used to sleep with him down him? They seemed to help him a lot.
He used to have chakra stones?
Yeah, and he used to put them on his point.
Wow.
And he'd sleep with him like in the palm of his hands, and he used to love them. He'd sit on the end of his bed in the morning, he'd shout me in, and I'd bring his cup of tea, and he'd be like, "Right, what are we asking for from the universe today?" It's called something. Manifesting.
Oh, yeah.
So he was like, "We need to manifest what we want from today."
Do you remember the gold bowl?
Yeah.
He had a gold bowl on his table and he said to anybody that would come in the house, "If you've got any old scrap gold, put it in my bowl. And one day I'm going to be rich."
Yeah.
Wow.
James Parker had other oddities. Loretta remembers how he'd eat mushrooms raw from the fridge. And though he may have lived much of his life at that time between his bed and his sofa, James was not stupid, far from it. In fact, everyone who met him would agree he was clever, really clever. Of the few possessions he had, the important things were his computers. And what was more important was how he set them to work. Because before most people knew anything about Bitcoin, James Parker was trying his best to mine them back when they were worth almost nothing.
He was a bit eccentric. And he'd have his little computers, you'd go up his house and you'd hear all the fans and I'd be like, "Turn it all off, how can you deal with it?" And he'd be doing these penny click things constantly. You know, I never really understood. I thought he was mad as a hatter. All this Bitcoin nonsense and everything. And he'd been playing with that for years and years, mucking about with it. He was just mining. And I'd be like, "You can't sleep with this." "Oh yeah, I like the noise." And he'd enjoy it. It was like you'd go to his house, his window would be open because all the fans were blowing. It's what he enjoyed. He'd spend hours and hours just pressing buttons.
So let's take a second here. Bitcoin, the digital currency that, depending on who you ask, is either the future of currency or a stupid, perhaps even crooked investment that your mates have just bought into, boring you endlessly about how they're making proper cash off crypto. Whatever your view, they are valuable and generally speaking have become even more valuable, even if crypto can be a wild ride. Making a full Bitcoin, actually creating a digital coin, takes a lot of computer power. It's not really the kind of thing an ordinary person can do at home. But what an ordinary person can do is collect up tiny fractions of Bitcoins. The way people do that is through something called a faucet website. You know, as the Americans would say, a faucet, like a tap that drip, drip, drips, just a little bit at a time. The deal with these sites is that you perform some action, like you click an advert or maybe solve a puzzle. You know, those things where you have to click on all the correct bytes just to prove that you're not a bot, that kind of thing. And then you're rewarded with a tiny fraction, a fragment of a Bitcoin that's yours to keep. And I do mean tiny. Do that enough times though, and maybe you can build up your Bitcoin holdings. Now, perhaps unsurprisingly, people get obsessed with this, and one of them who did was James Parker, back in that flat in 2015. But don't take it from me, take it from the man himself. This is James Parker.
I was collecting Bitcoin for free for years. My old computers, I used to have 5.
Right.
With loads of different browsers on them, with tabs open, you know what tabs are?
Yeah.
I'd say I have 8 tabs on one browser, 8 tabs on the next, whatever would fit across the screen. And I would be clicking them constantly, all day long, every 15 minutes, every 30 minutes, every 2 hours, every whatever the time limit was, click, 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 and collecting a reward of cryptocurrency.
All of this naturally racked up his energy bill, something James had tried to solve with the old trick of fiddling his electricity meter, nearly setting fire to it in the process. Undeterred, he'd then sign up to a crypto trading website, a website called CoinSpot.
Tell me about the trading on CoinSpot then. How does that work?
Right, you buy and sell.
Okay. And
Buy Bitcoin, sell Bitcoin. Buy Bitcoin, sell Bitcoin.
And you make a profit with each trade?
Yeah.
Profit? Well, I mean a little. What we're talking about around this time is literally pennies on the pound, tiny slivers of Bitcoin. Until one day, James notices something that changes everything. He's in his flat, striking up another cigarette as the remnants of the last ebbs in his ashtray. He takes a swig from a tin of lager that's gone flat and squints hard into the glow of his computer screen. It's the only thing he's been doing all day. He clicks to make a trade on CoinSpot, offering to sell a fraction of his Bitcoin. But almost immediately, he decides to buy it back. That's weird. The money's come in to his account from selling it. But oddly, it's cost him nothing to buy it back immediately. That's free money, isn't it? So he does it again, deliberately this time, trying to time the two actions almost at once.
It's just weird.
You keep saying it's weird.
Yeah.
What was weird? Is that what was weird?
If you were sat there watching it, you'd go, it's weird. It's hard to understandable.
The numbers going up.
The way the numbers went up, and it's just weird. That's just weird how it works. I don't know.
Is this really happening? Could this website really have a simple flaw, a glitch that's made him able to effectively create an ever-rising Bitcoin balance? Basically, a license to print money. His throat tightens and he coughs. His mind, what must have been going through it? Racing between fear and bliss. He sinks flat onto his bed, arms out wide, with a fag still in his lips. James Parker, a sick man living in penury, has just struck gold. But would anyone notice? Surely the website people would see that something was wrong, wouldn't they? Should he tell them that he's made free Bitcoin off their site? Or maybe just not.
My name's Dave Wainwright. Back in 2018, I was a detective constable, relatively new on our economic crime unit. And now all of a sudden, about 8 years have passed and life is different.
Would it be fair to say that the series of events that brought this case to your attention was unusual or weird? I mean, what were the chances of it all happening?
It was totally and utterly bizarre, like nothing else. The first time that you've bought your own currency for sale, the glitch, was the 23rd of June 2015. Were you aware of that at that time? Okay. No. When were you first aware that this glitch existed?
Not sure.
Okay. From what I've been told, he would spend nearly 24 hours a day in bed in his mouldy little rented council flat, just playing with websites, trying to make a small profit, buying one currency, selling it in exchange for another. And it looks like he used the glitch several times over the years before he actually realised what was going on. And at that point, he's absolutely spanked it.
Now, there's someone very important, central to this story, I've got to call on. On one street, behind the main promenade, behind the noise of the trams and the steady jangling of the fruit machine payouts, I drop into a cafe to meet a young woman who knows Blackpool well. A young woman who got caught up in this story in ways that still haunt her 6 years on.
I'm really into the history of Blackpool. And when Blackpool first became a resort, it was where all the rich people came. And over the years, it's slowly become, a mismatch of the upper class and the working class and some of the lower class.
This is Kimmy Caton. She's in her mid-20s, has tattoos, dyed red hair, piercings, and loves her punk music, as well as her history. As she's waiting for her iced caramel latte, I ask her if my suspicions are true that in this great British seaside town, beneath the gaudy veneer and the fun of the fair, there's always something a bit subversive, an undercurrent of something, a world unseen.
Yeah, Blackpool definitely is like that. I think because it's a town that's so vast, there is always something going on around the corner. It doesn't just seem that way, like it really is like that. Being by the sea was just so wonderful for me. I adore being near water. I was always a water baby. That's what my mum always said to me. I was always a water baby.
Mums. What would we do without them? You see, it's not just Kimmy who'd become central to all of this. It's her mum too. So this is where we meet Kelly Caton, Kimmy's mum. What would people think of when they think of your mum?
She is very intelligent and really creative. She did this thing called happy pranks. So she would shout us downstairs. We were in our rooms and she'd shout us as if, she was telling us off. And we'd come down and she'd set up a tea party. A big pot of tea, sandwiches, cakes, that kind of thing. I remember when we were young, she would always decorate for birthdays. So there was one birthday party where it was all cowboy themed. And she built this huge totem pole out of the inner tube of a carpet. And, she used paper mache and paint. And that's what I remember from her more happy moments, was that she was always very creative. If she wanted to do something, it had to be done there and then. She got these wild creative ideas in her head and just really wanted to get them out. Very determined.
But you know what it's like with teenagers. They can be pretty determined too. And in recent years, things haven't been quite the same for Kimmy and Mom Kelly.
I was very volatile. I myself have suffered with mental illness, and it definitely heightened when I was a teenager. So there was lots of arguments and Ultimately, our relationship ended shortly before all of this happened, when she asked me to leave the house.
And, well, that's the way it still is.
We haven't spoken since the day that she kicked me out, which was coming on 6 years now.
Their backstory is complicated. The relationship between Kimmy's mum and dad was not a happy one. There were lots of problems in the house, serious ones. And the days of birthday parties and fun pranks that Kimmy remembered earlier seemed gone for good.
My mum's mental health just slowly went downhill. And particularly after they separated, you know, she was a single parent, living on benefits. So that's really how things got so bad for her. As far as I can remember through all of my teenage years, she was very depressed.
Kimmy says that depression started eating its way into family life. With joblessness came poverty, with poverty came cold, and with cold came damp black mould creeping through their crumbling Blackpool home. Kelly would confine herself to her room and disappear into doom scrolling.
Anytime I would pop my head in to go and speak to her, she was always researching or watching a documentary about a new conspiracy theory. One that she liked to wind us up with was that she didn't believe in the concept of gravity. Not that she didn't believe that gravity existed,
right.
But we just had so many of these debates. And I think it started as a joke, and then she started to take it herself, like, very seriously. And I'd just sort of nod and say, yeah, okay. She loved Reddit. There's such a vast array of information on there and so many different subreddits. And I would assume that one day she just found herself on the cryptocurrency subreddit and started looking into it a bit more.
But how did she describe it? Like, what was she saying about it to you? Like, was she saying that this is like the future? This is something that everyone's going to get their head around? What was it?
She really believed that cryptocurrency as a whole would be the future of finance. You know, we would do away with paper notes and the way that banking is done now, and that crypto would be the future of all of that. That's definitely something I remember her talking about.
Just enjoying it it wasn't a way of making money, it was something that was new and interesting. I'm very into researching in forums and things, and these Bitcoin forums were full of all different ways of, you know, making Bitcoin and things like that. So I was experimenting and playing around and enjoying it. When I made my first foray into how Bitcoin was the thing to do, I was sitting in my room for 24 hours a day doing nothing, so I figured I could do that.
That is Kimmy's mum, Kelly. And look, I can sort of understand this. Kimmy's told us that her mum's nerves were just really bad. So it was just easier to hide away, clicking on scammy Bitcoin sites, dreaming of some new world order, because anything had to be better than the one she was in. But sitting around, well, that's not Kimmy's style. She had a life to get on with, which included, importantly, her boyfriend.
So I was dating Jordan at the time, and he worked behind the bar at the North Euston Hotel. And he came back to our house one evening after work and just had hundreds of pounds in tips. I remember us sat on the floor in our dingy little living room, and he was just counting it all out. And me and my mum were just sort of looking at each other, very confused by it. And Jordan said, there's a guy who's staying at the hotel, and every time he would pay for a drink, he'd pay with a £20 note and then tell us to keep the change. So I was a bit sceptical about...
That doesn't happen every day.
Yeah, that kind of stuff just doesn't happen in real life. No. You know, that's a storybook kind of character. So I felt a little bit uncomfortable. An older gentleman, you know, giving so much money to a younger man, and maybe if there were any false intentions behind it, I just sort of wanted to suss him out. So I went either the following day or, you know, a couple of days later to meet James and meet Jordan after his shift. And I remember introducing myself to James and saying, oh, I'm Jordan's girlfriend. And he said, you know, yeah, I've really taken a liking to Jordan. He's a lovely young lad. And he said, you know, what are you drinking? I'll buy you a drink. You know, I accepted just because a drink's a drink.
Why not?
And I said to him, I was totally honest. I was like, look, I just sort of wanted to get a feel for you because you are essentially just throwing so much money away. And he asked me at that time, what do you know about Bitcoins? And eventually when I went up to buy a drink, he stole my purse and threw loads of money in there, which I didn't realise until I'd gotten home.
Well, you just shoved your purse full of money?
Yeah. I don't remember exactly how much it was, but I remember getting home and opening my purse and there was just bills in there.
Again, that doesn't happen every day.
No. Yeah, so that is how I was introduced to James.
But what did you think when you got home? You saw that money in your purse. What did you think that was about? I mean, it must have in some ways stunned you, right?
Yeah, I was very confused. I didn't really know how to react to that. I didn't want to spend it just in case, you know, if he wanted anything from that or from me for giving me that money.
Where did you think he was getting it from? Did you have any idea, or were you just...
At that point, he was very vague in the fact that he made all his money from Bitcoins. Right. That's really all he said. He told me he was buying and selling Bitcoin, and that's how he made his money. I was just confused. I really didn't know how to feel about it at that time because I didn't know if there was any ulterior motives behind it.
All of that was in 2017, 2 years after James Parker had first discovered the glitch that would let him make Bitcoins out of thin air. He'd thought about what to do with the glitch he'd kept secret, and he decided to start using it. By now, a single Bitcoin was worth about £7,000, and James could make as many as he liked. Back at the hotel bar, Kimmy's conversation with James turned to her own family's situation. She told him of the struggles they were having in their damp and cold house.
So he said to me, how much money would it take for your mum to be able to move out of that house? And just as a round number, I threw out, you know, I don't know, maybe a couple of grand, something like that, which is not really feasible for us right now. And he excused himself and went up to his room, came back down with this envelope with exactly £2,000 in it. And he handed that to me and said, give this to your mum. I want you to move out of that house.
Wow.
So I did just that. I went home and I gave the envelope to my mum and I said, this is a gift from James. He wants to help us move. And at that point, that's when I think alarm bells went off in my mum's head, to be honest, because, again, we just didn't really know what his motives behind all of this were.
Well, it's not every day that basically a stranger gives you £2,000.
Yeah. So I remember this was on a Saturday. My mum said, I need to meet him. I want to suss him out a little bit. I want to get to know where his head is at.
When I went to meet James that first time, James had met a daughter and a boyfriend. And I was worried. Why is this man giving my daughter money and things like that? So it prompted me to actually go and meet James.
So I arranged to take my mum up to Fleetwood the following day, and we had Sunday lunch at the North Euston with him. And that is where he and my mum met. And they really hit it off.
This is the exact moment that will change Kimmy and her mum, Kelly's, lives forever. And not just them. In fact, a whole cast of friends are about to come into a story that seems so wild as to be unbelievable. James Parker is about to take his glitch to the next level.
30 grand in Grosvenor, I saw him withdraw one night. He'd done that at every casino in Blackpool.
Flush with Bitcoin, Blackpool is about to taste his riches.
And then within how long you're a millionaire? 10 minutes.
It was incredible, really. 5 kilos of gold, £1 million sterling in a suitcase. I thought all the Christmases had come at once.
There's just one big question, though. Is any of this legal? His old friends may not have had a clue about the Bitcoin wealth he'd quietly been glitching, but given he seemed to have come into some money, Loretta decided to do something for him, something to help that hacking chest of his.
His flat, it was horrendous, wasn't it? It was full of loads of crap. He wasn't getting out of bed.
She booked him into a local hotel for a bit of warmth and comfort.
And I booked him into the North Eastern because I thought it'd help him. But that was when he met Kim and Jordan. And that's when it all went bad.
All he was doing all night really was showing off his bank balance, which at that time I think was about £250,000.
And he wasn't joking either. James Parker had it all right, and much, much more was coming his way. From his room in the grand, warm hotel, this strange Bitcoin millionaire could begin sharing his vast wealth with some new pals. I mean, if you had the money, wouldn't you?
If this story was made into a film, there would be a lot of editing that had to be taken out of factual things that nobody would believe.
Checking in to a nice hotel. It's a pleasure, isn't it? Like coming home. You feel your concerns lift for a little while as you enter the door, taken away by being so close to the sea.
James was drinking across the bar. I was serving him pints. My friend who was working, he was saying, this bloke across the bar, he's got hundreds of thousands of pounds. Buy me drinks if I just give him company all night and he'll hand me some money.
Well, this is Kimmy's then boyfriend, Jordan, speaking to police about it all later. Jordan Robinson, just out of his teens really, an affable, gentle kind of guy, he too would be taken under Parker's wing.
When you're in a dead-end job, I thought that I would chance my luck as well. Went over the other side of the bar and I made it appear as if I didn't have enough money for a pint, which got him talking to me, just chucked a fiver at me and said, get yourself a pint. But for the vast majority of the night, he's just paying for drinks, giving money out here, there and everywhere.
What did you think about that?
I just found it crazy. You don't see it. For months afterward, I couldn't believe any of it was real.
In the bar of the North Euston, James Parker was making friends the way only a man with a wad in his wallet can.
And all he was doing all night really was showing off his bank balance, which at that time I think was about £250,000, which obviously I'd never even seen that amount on a phone near me, so even that just surprised me.
Do you think it was strange?
Of course I thought it was strange. I thought it was the weirdest thing I'd ever seen in my life. It seemed like a very, very lonely person.
Right.
He'd come to the hotel all on his own. There wasn't anybody with him, and he was paying for people to sit there and have drinks with him.
Right.
But as I say, we left the night as friends.
It was right here that a little group was beginning to come together. Kimmy, her barman boyfriend Jordan, and especially her mum Kelly, who by now was getting on with James famously.
I think their intelligence complemented each other. They both knew a lot about the world and they both had very strong opinions that seemed to align. And so they struck up a really good friendship. That was the first time in a long time that I saw my mum almost blossom out of her depression.
It helped her being there.
Yeah. It helped her being out of that house. It helped her to have a friend. I mean, the nature of depression is very isolating, and that was a huge issue that she had. It was really, really bad.
Being at the hotel, having James as a friend, it helped that.
She blossomed. She had a glow to her that I hadn't seen for maybe a decade.
And why do you think that was? Because it's a dramatic change.
She felt like she had help, which she hadn't had before. Being in the hotel and having James to look out for us, it just took a lot of pressure off of her. She wasn't worrying about money because James was just paying for everything. He made it very clear that he didn't want anything back. He just wanted to look after us.
But a curious man throwing around cash in the hotel, it'd be hard not to notice, right?
a lot of people in the North Euston Hotel, all the staff members, they thought he was a drug dealer. He's an old guy, he's got this money, nobody knows how he's got it. They either thought he was a drug dealer or he's recently sold his and his ex-partner's house or something and he's trying to live it large before he has to stop. One of his old favourite quotes was, "You hang around me and you'll become rich. You hang around rich people, you'll become rich."
James was hardly the first man to find himself newly minted and newly popular at the same time. But there was one more crucial person who would come into the North Euston's hotel bar to be received by James Parker after coming down from his suite.
Mr. Stephen Boys, who is he to you, Mr. Parker?
He was my financial advisor.
Okay.
And then became a business partner.
We ran an ad campaign for people wishing to review their pensions. And Mr. Parker responded to that ad, and so the lead came to me, purely by chance.
Meet Stephen Boys, a silver-haired, sturdy, formal kind of man in his 50s, ex-army, turned professional financial advisor. And he looked it too. Pinstripe suit, briefcase, sort of taut manner. He sorted out Parker's meagre pension, but then he got another call.
It was some 3 months later when he contacted me again, went out to see him, and that's when he told me that he neglected to tell me that he had Bitcoin holdings. And I thought all my Christmases had come at once. I'd stumbled across a Bitcoin millionaire as a client. Said, I'll happily advise you on options for investments. He wanted to buy properties. He wanted to do all sorts of different things with his newfound wealth. And I quite happily agreed to help him along that road.
And what was he like do you remember your first meeting? How would you describe it?
He was living in the bottom half of a 2 up, 2 down in Blackpool. It was cold, damp house, really. So I don't want to be unfair to him, but it stunk of cannabis. So I did form certain impressions about him, but he was a nice enough guy. He was really polite, open. I thought very honest with his answers to the questions I posed to him, and the transfer went ahead, and that was fine.
Mr. Boys ran it by his bosses. There were no red flags, no big questions. He was free to become the unlikely Parker's new financial advisor. Who was to say a shabby man on benefits couldn't have come good? But Stephen Boys' new job wouldn't be the easiest, because as he was about to find out, the strange James Parker seemed like he just wanted to give much of his newfound wealth away. Welcome to the sleepy town of Fleetwood, just a few miles up the road from Blackpool on the stretch of sea known as the Fylde Coast. The town that was also home to the Grand Hotel that James Parker was now living in, and a town that Detective Constable David Wainwright would become familiar with back in 2017.
With a case like this, there was a certain element of disbelief. Parker had a reputation along the Fylde Coast as being the self-proclaimed Bitcoin millionaire. We heard stories of taxis that would race to calls to his address, almost like the wacky races, because he'd give out such good cash tips. Part of it was just so brazen.
When he was in his pub, we picked him up every day. If you knew you was got to get James, you certainly wouldn't take a flag down off the street if someone tried to flag you down. But
oh God, some days we could have 10, 15 phone calls off him, depending on what he was doing.
You take him to Blackpool, wait for him. I think he went to the banks and that, and he'd give you like 150 quid. I remember one driver on our company shares the same surname, and he gave him 100 quid just throwing the same name.
But it wasn't just wads of tips. Other locals remember even more.
We thought it was all hearsay and fabrication and fantasy. But he did mention that he'd had lots of exotic holidays. I believe that he had shares in a yacht somewhere in the Far East. He'd bought cars, very expensive cars.
One story went that he was in the pub got chatting to someone who was a bit down on the luck, and the next day took them to the local dealership and bought them a car.
A habit that the hotel's barman, Jordan Robinson, knew well.
He bought maybe 10, 15 cars. In the beginning, he only bought Mercedes, 3 from the Mercedes garage here in Blackpool. His blue one that he's got. He bought one for his ex-girlfriend, and he also bought another person one. I think that was a 2015 C-Class, and I saw it on my way here. But that's like a £30,000 car as well.
Even people he didn't even know in a pub, just who wants a car? Anybody and everybody. So he was a very, very generous man. He bought a share of a pub in Fleetwood and paid, I think it was 27 Bitcoin for that.
The way that I viewed it was he was a kindred spirit. He was a nice person trying to help out anyone he could, as long as they were okay.
And like I say, a week, 2 weeks, maybe more, we saw him again. And this time he was with another guy that actually told us the same tale. So we thought, there is some truth in this then. I said to my friend, I says, do you believe all that? My friend said, no, I think he's Walter Mitty. I think he's making all this up. And I said, I don't know. I've seen stranger things.
Speaking of strange things, it's at this point that something equally strange is about to happen. These were the early days of Bitcoin trading, and trading was sketchy, very sketchy. James Parker had come into all of this Bitcoin by finding a glitch, but it was about to be his turn to get fleeced. During his illicit trading, someone had managed to con him out of a clutch of Bitcoin, 27 of them actually, which at this point are worth 10 grand each. So you can do the maths. That's 270 grand he's just lost to some other scammer. Just as well, he's got a financial advisor on hand, right?
See, I said, well, you've told me about it now. I can't just ignore it. I've got to report it. So I did. I contacted Action Fraud and reported the hacking of my client's Bitcoin, spoke to the police. James wanted nothing to do with it. He literally said, no. I said, well, I've got to do it. So when the police finally did contact me, it was my details that I'd put down on the Action Fraud website.
No way was James having anything to do with it, for obvious reasons. His Bitcoin glitching adventure could have stopped dead right here, had some probing questions been asked. Lucky for him then, there wasn't much danger of that in Lancashire. Detective Sergeant David Wainwright. Had you heard of Bitcoin? Did you have much sort of conception of what it was?
Me? No.
You hadn't heard of it at all?
No. The period of learning was quite significant.
This is going to confuse you even more. Do either of you know what a Bitcoin miner is?
Has he got a hat on? A big hat?
That's what I thought when I first heard it.
We were a bit, I don't like to use the word clueless, but we didn't know what we didn't know at the time.
But there was one officer on the force who did.
So we met at a coffee shop and we spoke very briefly as he was on his way to see Mr. Parker.
Zain ul-Haq was a detective with Lancashire Police in 2017 and went to meet Stephen Boys after that strange call about stolen Bitcoin was passed to his desk.
He always wore kind of like a suit and he was very smart and clean shaven, very presentable. I learned more about what he does for the job, and he described to me he gives tax advice and he gives investment advice to his customers, some of who are high net worth. It made perfect sense. I felt very confident with him.
Which made it all the more bizarre that Stephen Boys had to now relay quite the reverse ferret.
Mr. Boys reiterated that Mr. Parker didn't want any police action to be taken. He changed from wanting police to take action to actually saying it's no big deal.
A squeaky bum moment had passed unsqueaked. James Parker's Bitcoin stash remained unexamined for now, and all Detective Zane could do was ponder over this curious encounter.
I'm always cynical and suspicious of people. Perhaps I need to observe and reflect and then wait for my challenge. You don't always, need to challenge things immediately.
Others might have laid low, stopped using a lucrative glitch they'd found, maybe even just reined in their spending, kept their head down. But not James. His life centered now in the sparkle and the light, the warmth of the North Euston Hotel, made possible only with Bitcoin riches, was better than anything he'd had in years. And warmth, well, that seems to really be the word. His new friend, Kimmy Caton. Do you like him?
I really did. I really did. He was a very good friend to me. I was able to talk to him about things. I felt very comfortable with him. I didn't feel like there was any ulterior motives behind him wanting to have a friendship with me. He never leered at me. He never made me feel like an object or anything like that. He was genuinely interested in me as a person. There was never anything that I felt that was off with him. When I told him, when I first met him, that, my clothes were falling apart because the mold was getting into them and there was a lot of dry rot there, he took me and Jordan out and bought us entirely new wardrobes. Not just stuff from, like the big chain places. He made sure that we had really good quality stuff to wear.
He liked to take her out on shopping trips and do the pretty woman thing.
Yeah.
It felt very, very surreal. I'd gone from paddling in a pool to being swimming in the sea. From going to not leaving the house at all, to being taken up to Fleetwood, to go to this big hotel and then going on big shopping trips. It was mind-blowing. It didn't feel like anyone on the planet was like this. Spending all this money and witnessing him giving it away, it was very whirlwind.
Okay.
Kimmy and her mum Kelly would go back and forth to the hotel daily, helping James out with whatever he needed, enjoying his largesse. And after a while, James even paid for a room for Kelly, getting her out of her damp and cold home. Questions? Well, maybe they could wait.
I mean, wouldn't you? If you were living in, I hate to describe my life like this, but if you were living in squalor, every item of clothing you owned had mold spots and smelled like damp, your furniture was falling apart. To buy bread and milk on a day, you were literally scraping together pennies from down the sides of sofas, and you were offered the opportunity to raise yourself up out of that. If you were in such a deep desperation, I feel like anybody would do it.
Maybe. I'll be honest, something that's given me pause for thought when learning about all of this, in fact, in some ways has started to trouble me, is this. Why such overwhelming generosity from James? Seems to me that when most people get properly rich, the paradox of thrift sets in, and quick. I.e., you finally got something. Why give it away? What made James want to do that with such abandon? Well, clues did start to emerge. As the days and nights in the hotel went on and Kimmy got to know James a bit better, he opened the door just a little bit to his character. Did James ever tell you much about himself? Like about his past, his history, his personal life story, any of that? Or was he more mysterious?
He told me a few things. A really interesting story that he told me, actually, was part of the reason that he felt he needed to be so generous with people was there was one night I'm not sure if he was high, drunk, whatever it was, he had laid himself down on the tram tracks and was planning on ending his life. And a complete stranger came and picked him up, dusted him down, and just spoke to him. and really made him feel more human. That was one of the first stories about his life that he ever actually told me. But as far as, more intimate details go, he didn't divulge those to me personally.
But it's clear that he'd had trauma in his past.
It was very clear that he had a traumatic background.
Ensconced in that hotel bar, James Parker splashing more cash than any of them had ever seen. They all had reasons to be there. James himself, for friendship, attention, worth, belonging even. Kimmy and her mum Kelly, not to be cold, not to shiver at night, breathing in the mould, for a warm bed and a building not falling apart. Not to mention some very nice treats from the shops along the way. And Kimmy's boyfriend Jordan, who quickly glimpsed just the possibility of something better.
At the time, being in a dead-end job, I'd only just come off Universal credit. I thought, in a way, I'd found my lifeline. I thought, this is where I'm meant to be. This is the person I'm meant to follow. If I follow him, one day I might have enough money to buy my own house if I'm lucky enough.
We all sort of came together to be this group of misfits, but he was definitely the leader. It wasn't said or spoken about, but you could just feel the energy that we all followed him.
I asked a moment ago about his staggering largesse and generosity. Well, he's about to go one step further. Here, just before New Year's Eve in 2017, James Parker actually shows his new best friend, Kelly Caton, sharing his precious secret, the font from which all his new wealth flows, the money machine.
We'd go to the bar and have a few drinks and then he'd go up to his room and things and he'd be like, oh, it's...
Can you remember what James showed you then, how he was making the Bitcoin?
He was putting the Bitcoin into the safe and then it was like he was buying it back off himself.
And as if it wasn't magical enough to actually observe making money out of absolutely nothing, there was more. He showed Kelly how to do it herself, giving her a gift that you could pretty well describe as priceless.
And did you then repeat this process yourself?
Yeah, but I was always with James when we did it.
So tell me about that then.
He ironically told me, just make sure you just do low amounts at the time.
Okay. Did he tell you the reason why you could only take low amounts out?
Just said, just don't be greedy, basically, which is fair enough.
So it was here, in the North Houston Hotel, that Kelly Caton first logged on to the Bitcoin exchange just to have a go herself at using the glitch. On that first day that she learned the trick, she did it, and she did it again, and again, and again, giving herself access to more money than she'd ever seen in her life. And James's generosity, well, it continued. There was one other special person with whom he'd entrust his secret.
In my eyes, creating money out of nothing was just giving you money for free. That's what I was seeing.
Jordan Robinson's friendship and attention would also be rewarded as James sat him down in front of his laptop, registered him on the Bitcoin exchange, clacked his fingers together.
In that first sitting, he'd probably made me maybe 90 Bitcoins and he turned around to me and just went, oh, look what I've made you. You're a millionaire now. I couldn't believe it. I was dumbfounded. When somebody's telling you stuff like that, I didn't know what to think at the end of the day.
Didn't you question it in your head?
Well, I did. I questioned it. I thought in my head, I was like, what the fuck is going on? This isn't real. You're living a fantasy, but it was happening. I was sat there. I was watching the numbers turn over. I'd seen him turn it into money. It never occurred to me that it was coming out of somebody else's pocket. That wasn't what we were seeing. James, he basically said, you want to get on now and do it. He was always anticipating that the website was going to find out. But the way that he saw it, it's a glitch. You can't be prosecuted for it. From what he was telling me, he said, you're making money out of nothing. It's a victimless crime.
To be absolutely specific and exact, when did you find out about the glitch? What circumstances?
I couldn't give you an exact date or time or how long we had been friends with James, but I remember Mum explaining to me that James had figured out a glitch on this website and had taught my mum how to utilize it. And that was really it. I was confused by how this glitch worked, but I didn't really exactly know the right questions to ask to figure that out either. There was sort of an air of secrecy around it. My mum made it very clear that James wanted to keep this secret.
And the fact that she was so keen to keep it secret, that didn't strike you as odd or potentially suspicious in any way?
Not in the legal sense. Not in any sense, to be honest. I really felt like she wanted to keep it secret to avoid the glitch being patched.
Or for other people to learn about it?
Yeah.
And it goes away?
Yeah, for that reason. He didn't want it to be utilised too much and then the website patch it and they can no longer do that.
Now, it is important to say here that the hotel bosses had no idea at all that any kind of Bitcoin glitching was going on. Parker was, after all, just another guest in his room. The staff certainly knew about Parker's madcap tipping, though, and tongues were wagging. Parker was told politely but firmly to stop throwing cash around the staff. And they weren't the only ones wanting some quiet words. James Parker's local bank branch had gone and frozen his account, suspicious of the new money suddenly flooding in. This, though, was a job for James's new financial advisor to handle. Stephen Boys set about getting it reopened. And when Boys had met the police, he'd actually asked for their help to get James's bank account unlocked. And the funny thing is, not only had he swerved probing questions, but they also did exactly that.
So I helped them as well. All of his bank accounts, gave them, and they came to exactly the same conclusion as me at the end of their investigation, that there was nothing suspicious about this guy. He was a genuine Bitcoin trader. And the police helped me unfreeze his bank accounts.
Did he tell you about the glitch at that point?
No.
He didn't tell you?
No, definitely not.
So the police had not only missed their first chance, but actually helped James Parker through the good work of his new advisor. One detective, though, was still scratching his head a bit too hard over all of this. Zain-ul-Haq needed to get eyes on James Parker for himself, and after several weeks, he'd managed to track him down to that hotel bar.
I enter the hotel lobby, look around, look at the bar. There's Mr. Parker. I hadn't met him before. I just kind of knew it was him. His scruffy hair, his bright dishevelled, stained clothes from behind. I knew it was him immediately. I've approached him, the smell of stale cigarettes and alcohol. I sidled next to him. I think he knew we were straight away. He wasn't surprised. He was happy for me to sit and talk with him.
Zain was surprised enough that James was happy to chat, but probing deeper, he was about to be floored. He did seem to have lost those 27 Bitcoin. Sure enough, they had disappeared. The thing was, James didn't care that much.
I could not get to the bottom of it. Mr. Parker said part of the reason why he didn't want to make a complaint was he had a lot more Bitcoin. He said, I've got over 500 Bitcoin. That would have been over £5 million at that time. It was just ludicrous.
So Detective Zain leaves the North Euston Hotel much more confused than when he went in, but much more determined to find out.
I knew he was talking absolute BS. And it was so frustrating. I knew what he was just flat out lying to my face. And cops obviously hate lies.
You know what it's like when you come into money, right? The local banks, they're for the little people. You need to go somewhere comfortable with the big bucks and little questions. We're flying with him to Dubai, where if you've got the money, anything can be bought.
He walks around Dubai with this £1 million in sterling in a suitcase, and he finds his local friendly Russians and buys a villa.
To this day, I think, well, why didn't I just turn around and walk away?
There's just one thing. The owner of the Bitcoin site that James has been glitching has managed to catch up with him, and he wants a word right now. Airports, whatever you think of them, are places of possibility. The possibility of suddenly being somewhere distant and different. It's January 2018. James Parker and Stephen Boyes are at Manchester Airport. Tickets to Dubai in their hands. A world of opportunity. But airports can be unsettling too. Going through security. That moment when your heart starts racing, even when you've got nothing to hide. So imagine what it feels like when you possess a secret worth millions. But once he's through security, James Parker's phone starts buzzing. Unknown number.
I sort of mouthed to him, "Who is it?" And he just passed the phone to me.
On the other end is a man who's figured out how James Parker got so rich. He's figured it out because it's his money. And he wants his money back. What James Parker doesn't know as he stands there is that his scam is starting to unravel. That everything he's built in Blackpool, the money, the friends, the new life, it's all about to come crashing down. There are only two choices. Turn around, face the music, or get on the plane to Dubai and pray. So, what would you do?
He made it very clear that he wanted to give back to us. That he had been in similar positions that my family was in at that time.
Kimmy Caton wanted to help James out, just like he'd helped her family. And James needed help because with lots of money came lots to do, starting with updating his appearance from what we might call disheveled to something with more glow.
At one point, he hired me as his PA. He would often just say, "This is my PA. She's going to speak for me." So he liked to have his suits pressed, his shirts and his jackets pressed. And I would book his appointments for him to get manicures and for the barbers and stuff like that.
That was important to him.
Yes. He got a haircut every 2 weeks. He always had his beard trimmed and shaped. And every few weeks, we would book in to go to the nail salon together. I would get my long, fancy acrylic nails, and he would have his nails buffed and shined. He was impeccable about his personal hygiene.
People must have been very curious about where that money was coming from, right? Or did they know, or was it a secret, or?
For the most part, he just told people that he traded Bitcoin. And really at the time, Bitcoins were so new that I think people were just skeptical about them in general.
Back in 2017, you have to remember that trading cryptocurrency was very different from today's well-established, well-marketed, user-friendly interfaces. It was still a fringe activity for the committed, even the eccentric.
It was hard to buy Bitcoin back then. It was hard.
This is Fred Shabesta, an Australian tech entrepreneur who got into crypto before most.
You'd send people money that you had no idea who they were, and when you'd sent it, it just didn't arrive immediately, and you were like, well, I hope it arrives one day. And then you just email someone, and someone randomly would reply and say, oh, I see it. Yeah, no worries. It's in your account now. Lots of exchanges were getting hacked. A lot of people were getting hacked. It was all just very rudimentary, very basic. Compared to now, like you just do stuff on your phone.
When Detective Zane had called in to see him at the hotel, James Parker had told him that he had 500 Bitcoin, an astonishing sum. But the thing is, converting that to cash wasn't the easiest thing to do, especially back in 2017. James had been depositing it into his local bank branch on the high street, but they'd become troubled by the size of the numbers and blocked his account. Something his barman pal, Jordan Robinson, had seen happen.
Because obviously in that sort of crazy world, I just thought, oh yeah, well, if it is Bitcoin, of course they're going to be wary of it. Of course they're going to freeze his account.
He needed a new way to convert his Bitcoin fast. And surfing the Bitcoin forums, he'd found it. He connected with a man who went by the name of Jamal, who was based in Dubai and who could do just that.
You mentioned Jamal a few times. Who's he?
Jamal's his business partner over in Dubai. Jamal is his trader. Jamal was the person who, when James wanted to get some money for his Bitcoins, that's who he'd send his Bitcoins to, because apparently in Dubai it's very easy to cash him in. So Jamal would get these Bitcoins off James, take them to people he knew would buy them or sell them on exchanges, that sort of thing, and send the money straight back to the UK.
Jamal may have been in Dubai, but for James's new PA, he was just a phone call away.
I spoke to him a couple of times and he was just a lovely gentleman. I couldn't speak on if he knew that there was anything funny going on. His job was to deal with James's finances, as far as I was aware.
Did he seem shady to you in any way, did you think?
Jamal, no, he absolutely wasn't shady. Like I say, he was a really lovely guy.
Unlike with any business, well, you can always do things on the phone, can't you? But it's always better to meet in person, which brings us back to the airport. So, picture the scene. The unlikely character of James Parker is on his way to Dubai with his friend and financial advisor in tow. But if getting through security is a hassle for the rest of us, spare a thought for the chain-smoking James.
I was wheeling him in a wheelchair because he wasn't in very good health. He couldn't walk more than, say, 100 metres without being physically out of breath and having to sit down.
Once he does, though, this is the moment.
I could see on his face it was an uncomfortable call. I sort of mouthed to him, "Who is it?" I couldn't obviously hear the other side of the conversation, but I could see his concern. He just literally handed the phone to me and said, "You deal with that."
Which was quite the ask, because the person on the other end of the line was the man in charge of the Bitcoin exchange that James had glitched.
He then said, "Your client's stolen £34 million worth of Bitcoin from my company." I said, "Well, look, I know absolutely nothing about this, but we're about to board a flight to Dubai." He says, "Oh my God, you're running off with all my Bitcoin." I said, "Well, we're not running anywhere. We're going on a business trip to see a broker in Dubai." I said, "Look, we're on a 7.5-hour flight now, so I'll get to the bottom of this, and if I can help, I will help. Let me speak to James and get to the bottom of what's actually gone on here. Give us a ring back when we arrive in Dubai." We left the conversation there.
The caller's name was Russell Wilson, the near-billionaire founder of the CoinSpot trading platform. He was ringing all the way from Australia, and he wasn't done.
Within maybe 10, 15 minutes, we were actually on the plane, taxiing, ready to take off, and we got another phone call from Russell Wilson where he called James a thief. James told him to F off, so I won't speak to him again. I took the phone call again, explained, "Look, let me get to the bottom of it and find out exactly what's gone on." Again, reiterated, "If I can help, I'll help."
How are you feeling? Were you panicking?
I wasn't, no.
You weren't worried at all about it? I mean, it must have come as a shock, as you say.
No, I wanted to know what was going on, but I wasn't panicking. I hadn't done anything wrong. And that's when James explained to me that he had lied to me. He didn't buy Bitcoin when it was 50p in 2009. Discovered a glitch on CoinSpot's exchange. He'd exploited that glitch.
So why did you get on the plane? Because some people listening might think, you know what, if that were me, I've heard about this.
It's probably one of my biggest regrets to this day. I think, well, why didn't I just turn around and walk away? But I'm not the sort of person that would leave a guy in a wheelchair and just dump him on the gangway to board a plane.
You could have said, let's not go to Dubai. I'm going to take you home. I don't really want any part of this.
Yeah, hindsight's a wonderful thing. I said, look, have you stolen Bitcoin to him? He said, no, I haven't stolen anything off anybody. I said, right, come on, you'll explain it to me on the plane.
You can only imagine what was going through Stephen Boy's head on that flight to Dubai if, as he claims, this was the first he'd ever heard about the source of his friend's unlikely wealth. But rather than simply get cross at his pal, fuming, worrying for hours like the rest of us might have done on that flight, he decided to do something else and talk about in-flight entertainment.
I spent the next, 7.5 hours researching CoinSpot, looking at their website, their terms and conditions, and he hadn't breached a single one.
Which strikes me as a brave conclusion to come to, having heard what he did just hours earlier. But despite James Parker now being thoroughly rumbled, Stephen Boys had decided to carry on with their gamble, leaving the friends free to enjoy both business and pleasure. Now, as luck would have it, Detective Zain Ul-Haq had also got wind of this unlikely trip. He'd been phoning both Parker and Boys, trying to arrange another meeting.
And they said, we're at the airport. We're going to Dubai. What would somebody from Blackpool, who has never been abroad before, who I didn't think had a passport until very recently, be doing in Dubai, of all places?
Among all of Dubai's opulence and wealth, two unlikely characters from Lancashire. Their plan was to set up new business opportunities with Jamal, with whom Stephen Boys had been in a whirl of appreciative email exchanges. So much so that they'd even given each other nicknames. Maybe it was Stephen's thin, gaunt frame, but he'd somehow ended up getting the name Rodney from Only Fools and Horses.
So the fact that they're over in Dubai, almost like Del Boy and Rodney on one of the Christmas special episodes where whatever happens is going to be hilarious.
And this Jamal was in on the joke because he seemed to like to be called Denzel, the Scouse delivery driver from the sitcom. But this was no joke because as soon as they arrived, he had wads of cash ready and waiting for them to spend.
Arrived safe and sound, love. Jamal has a full itinerary set for us. He's brilliant, really looking after us. Gave me and James 20 grand each in cash as spending money as soon as we arrived. We're just sorting out the rooms now.
And this would be quite the holiday. I know because I've seen the photos. Sat in the plush hotel restaurant are a beaming trio. Jamal, Stephen Boys, and James Parker in neat blazers, crisp shirts, and arms around one another. All smiles for the camera, the nightlights of Dubai City twinkling far below. And Stephen Boys, while he was setting himself up, big time, another email home to his wife.
1 million quid ready to go in my bank account when it finally gets opened.
Look, he's attached a photo as well. It's all cash. 1 million. Bloody hell, that's more money than I've ever seen, that.
I've never seen anything like it before in my life. Neither had James. There's a picture of him with the cash and gold on the hotel bed.
There most certainly is, and it's an extraordinary picture. a bearded, cowboy-hatted James Parker grinning in full mirror selfie mode in front of stacks and stacks and stacks of cash. And in a smattering of other photos on James and Stephen's phones, gold. Bars and bars and bars of solid gold. This desert citadel has become a magnet for crypto traders and investors keen to spend big and spend in style. And business was something that Stephen Boys was keen to do with Jamal. For months beforehand, he'd been emailing him daily, keeping a drip feed of Parker's money coming to the UK, thousands at a time, in constant deposits. But the pair's dealing with Jamal wasn't just about cash. They had bigger ambitions.
James loved luxury. He considered himself to be a very luxurious person, buying gold and jewellery. So, the height of luxury is buying a property in Dubai.
One of the main reasons James and Stephen went to Dubai wasn't just to meet their money man. They wanted his help for bigger, longer-term investments. They wanted to get into property. Villas, to be precise. Expensive villas. Several of them.
What the villa itself cost, looking about 5 million dirhams, which was 1.6 million pounds.
Right. Of apartments?
£500,000 each. So you're looking at excess of a £5-6 million deal all in.
Right.
All the apartments were owned by a Russian company, I believe.
Okay. How many properties did you buy in Dubai?
I've got a list, haven't I?
I've got a list, but I'm asking if you remember.
I think it's 4 apartments.
Right, hang on a minute here. It's worth just pausing to take this in. A penniless man from a mouldy flat in Blackpool who just months previously had nothing, and I mean nothing, is now in Dubai buying villas for cash. He wasn't a hacker. He was a chancer. And chance, to him, had been a fine thing. He was a man who put pennies in a gold bowl, thinking one day he'd somehow be rich, and it had all come true. All because of a glitch on a website and taking the risk on a trip of a lifetime with his pal, like a real Del Boy and Rodney. Even though he'd been rumbled, for some reason, he was hell-bent on spending.
Where did the money come from to buy them?
Bitcoin.
So you've given Jamal a Bitcoin to buy these for himself. So let me catch up a second.
He goes to a broker. He goes, say the property costs you 5 gold bars. You go in, you go, build your 5 gold bars, sign the paper, you get the keys, you own the property. That's how it is in Dubai.
A phrase he used was cash is king in Dubai, and you can get whatever you want, anything at all, if you've got cash. And that's how he secured an almost £500,000 discount off a purchase of a villa by paying in cash and gold. This was off a group of Russians. We went round to secure the deal. That was another reason for him taking me out there. He wanted to make sure that everything was done correctly.
So, how exactly do you buy apartments from Russians in cash as, a registered financial advisor?
Here's another text Stephen Boys sent to one of his pals this time. It was crazy, mate. Walking around Dubai with 5 million dirhams in cash in a suitcase as we purchased the properties off the Russians, and they wanted cash sales as they checked every single note by hand, and the deals took ages just to count the money. It was like something out of a movie, mate. Speak soon. All the best, Steve.
And look, his mates even texted him back.
Wow, that's fucking like Wall Street movie. You're a star, mate.
The text message you're referring to was quite comical, and you can imagine the situation. Boys has just done a deal, and and we've got the photographs off their phones, he's got 6.4 million dirhams, which is $1 million in sterling, which is a bulky amount of paperwork. So what do you do?
This is Detective David Wainwright, who would see all of this later.
You can't get on the plane home because you'll be stopped at customs. You can't rock up at the local bank because Even in Dubai, they'll ask you where it come from and seize it from you. So what do? He walks around Dubai with this £1 million in sterling, 6.4 million dirhams in a suitcase, and he finds his local friendly Russians and buys a villa, then has the audacity to complain that it took them all day to count all the money. Who on earth would ever think that could possibly be legitimate?
Hard to think of a situation, isn't it? Here's just a suitcase full of my gold bullion, officer.
Yeah, the weight of it, in a hot country, walking around carrying that weight must have been quite an effort in itself. And then to stand there in front of a load of Russian don't know who people while they count it, you'd be fearful for your life.
It is quite an image to think of them there, isn't it? I mean, a man who's pretty ill and a man who's perhaps not got the most moral scruples in the world, very unusual character, not been to that part of the world before,
yep.
Standing there, lugging this case around, as you say, full of gold bullion and notes. And what an image, in the middle of the Arabian desert.
Did you walk around? Anyone want to sell me something that's worth about £1 million, please? What you do? How do you meet people like that? So the story goes, they ended up spending the day in the back office of this dodgy estate agents while these Russian people counted the money. I mean, how uncomfortable must that have been? And at any point, someone pulls out a gun and you're getting frog-marched out and you've left your money behind. It's such a reckless situation to put yourself into.
Before he left, James had shown his friend, Kelly Caton, exactly how to use the glitch, snugged together at the hotel bar. And considering where Kelly had come from, perhaps it's not surprising that she'd started glitching Bitcoin of her own off the CoinSpot trading platform. Kelly's daughter, Kimmy.
She started actually treating herself to things. For the longest time, she just never bought anything for herself. If there was any money to go somewhere, it'd go on us. Just buying the things that we wanted.
Kelly was able to make Bitcoin from the glitch, sure enough, but there was no Dubai money man for her to make them into cash. She had to do something a bit more basic, buying online store cards with them through websites accepting Bitcoin as payment.
What, Kelly, can you tell me about Gift Off?
It's a website that sells gift cards for various shops and things and accepts Bitcoin in payments.
Okay, have you used that website?
Yeah.
What kind of things have you purchased?
Gift cards.
For which shops?
Tesco, Devon's, I believe.
In total, Kelly would glitch 337 Bitcoin to her own wallet, done mostly with James beside her at the hotel. A total that by March of 2018 would have been worth a stunning £2.8 million.
Did you worry that it may not have been legal?
Well, again, no, because of everything that James was doing and Stephen was assuring us that this was fine to do. He was the financial expert. I'd also spoken to solicitors.
When the money was flowing, did you really never think this can't be right or legal? Did it never really cross your mind in a sustained way to think there's got to be something dodgy here?
From my recollection, there was no sustained suspicion that really flashed through my mind. I've always been a mummy's girl, and so I have always just believed at her word the things that my mum said. So when she mentioned about the glitch, really there was no red flags or, warning lights that went off for me. I just believed her. I just thought that, wow, James is very lucky and fortunate to have found this, and it couldn't have happened to a better person. And I'm really glad that our family has found a way to get out of the situation that we've been in. But no, there was never any real suspicion from my behalf, to be honest.
Do you understand why some people might find that difficult to believe?
Absolutely. Absolutely, I do. And I don't expect people to just believe me at my word either. I'm not here to try and convince anybody. I'm just here to tell my story. I've always been a very naive person. I'm not proud of my naivety, but it is something that rears its head quite often.
And of course, it wasn't just Kelly. Jordan was at it too.
prior to me making this account, Kelly had already made an account, and before I knew it, she'd already made 100 Bitcoins using his method. And all he ever kept saying to us is, it's all above board. It's a glitch in their system. You're not profiting off anyone. You're profiting off a glitch, which is all legal.
But let's go back to the sunshine, back to Dubai, because it's here that I can let you into one of the most intriguing parts of this whole tale. It turns out when CoinSpot called James Parker, they weren't just calling him a thief. They'd also offered a deal to make the embarrassing loss of millions of dollars worth of crypto from their site all go away. It was a deal Stephen Boyes was eager to get done.
You were his financial advisor. Clearly, you must have been a big alarm bells going off in your head.
Yeah, well, Russell
what did you
Wilson,
advise him to do?
I advised him to listen to Russell Wilson, don't settle with him. He was offering him a civil settlement. He said, you can still walk away from this, a very rich man, if you give me back a good proportion of the Bitcoin that you've stolen.
This is Detective David Wainwright.
CoinSpot ring Parker, give us the money back, and he gets an FU. Boyes then steps in. He takes it upon himself, representing his client from Dubai, to start a negotiation. Basically, what you'd call is a non-disclosure agreement, although he called it a gagging order. Don't tell the cops, and we'll return 436, because that's all we're allowed to return. Can't find the rest. It's all lies.
The offer of a deal, it was like a gift from the gods. But to pull this higher wire act off, newly minted millionaire Stephen Boyes has to retrieve as many Bitcoin as he can. And that's when he begins phoning everyone who was shown the glitch, which is when their panic truly sets in.
Some Google searches were made, and again, same black laptop. Is taking advantage of a glitch illegal? Was that you who did that Google search?
I was making sure it wasn't illegal.
Okay. So these other ones, can I prosecute someone who exploited a glitch to take money from my website? Program glitch payments not taken in Bitcoin trade. Prosecuted for profiting from a glitch. Illegal to make money from a glitch in trading website cryptocurrency.
So this is when I was made aware of this situation.
What did you start to think when he contacts you to say it's now coming on top? We need to get the money out.
Well, that's when I started shitting myself.
James Parker's new friends may have been shitting themselves, and rightly so, but this strange man was in no mood for fessing up.
If we were due to go out anywhere, go into Blackpool town centre, go to a shop in Fleetwood or anything like that, it would always be when he wanted to go, everybody had to go.
I've caught up again with Kimmy Caton in a cafe in the town.
He was like the leader of things. And I think he felt entitled to do that because he had that kind of money and the things that he was offering us. And we just sort of went along with it as well because we didn't want him to feel disrespected.
James had shown incredible generosity to her and her mum. A devil-may-care generosity, to be sure. But get on his other side, and he could have an acid tongue. Even his friends said so, including Loretta and Amy.
He wouldn't get violent or anything like that. It just sort of it was the way he was saying it, not what he was saying.
That was when the God thing, I think. He would become God, and he thought he was God, and...
God, what do you mean God? I had become God? How do you mean?
He had this thing, James had this thing that he was put on this earth to prove to God through his actions in his life that he could ascend onto God so God could retire.
So God could retire?
Yeah, so that he could take over God's place.
So he genuinely thought that he could take over from God?
Yeah.
So he would say that to you, though? He would say...
yeah, we talk openly about it. He talked to everyone about it.
That's why we knew he was poorly.
So what would he say? He would just say...
He'd just be like, don't worry, when I'm God, I'll give you your own island.
When I'm in charge.
Yeah, when I'm in charge, I'll sort you out and you'll have your own island. We used to play along, and turn around and say, what are we getting?
He just wanted to please everybody, didn't he? And like you say, when I'm there, I will help everybody and make sure everybody's okay.
Seeing him so happy about his little imaginary island. It was worth it.
I mean, did you ever say, "Oh, come on, Jenny, you're not going to be God"?
It didn't end well.
No, because we knew he was ill.
It didn't end well.
No, because James had in his mind it was golden. That's what was going to happen.
Yeah.
So there was no arguing it with him because he knew.
When we spoke to Larissa yesterday, she said that he had a God complex, that he thought he would be God, and that maybe that everything that happened was like a kind of staging post to achieving that. Do you think that's right?
I think it's less of a God complex and more of a Jesus complex. He really saw himself as the savior of man. But I don't think there was anything malicious about it. He really did want to help people. And maybe if he had these sort of self-delusions that he was the next Messiah, he never made that clear to me, but his actions would definitely align with that.
There's something that's been nagging at me throughout all of this, and I think maybe now is the right time to address it. James's relationship with people who were impressionable teenagers and young adults when this happened is a curious one, and curious is perhaps a sympathetic word. Since I've been digging into him, learning about him, there are some who have hinted that there might have been something untoward, something darker about his motives, and that thought had certainly occurred to me as well. But the thing is, that is actually emphatically rejected by the very people who were young and knew him at the time, the people who knew him best.
We just sort of clicked, like we always did. Like, didn't
that was nurturing you, I think.
Yeah.
She was his daughter.
It was literally like that.
Yeah.
Did you ever feel like, was it ever too much or
no, because
odd or weird in any way?
It's Grandad James, so if he was having a bad day,
yeah,
you knew it was just a bad day.
And do you think, I mean, he sounds like he was there for you. I mean, were you there for him? Was it a kind of,
oh yeah,
was it a mutually beneficial relationship?
Yeah. He liked having me there, didn't he?
Yeah.
He used to have a go at me when I went home.
Yeah, he didn't like being on his own. He liked company.
Yeah.
He liked people around him.
Even if I wasn't in the same room and I was in the front room, he just liked the fact to know that someone was there.
And as we sat in Amy's front room, huddled beside each other on the sofa, houseplants hemming us in on every side, James Parker's deeper story, his real story, began to bleed through.
He told me about the foster homes and the abuse that he had to go through. Because as far as I could gather, he was in a foster home when he was younger, because he spoke about that. And he was abused in foster care and at his foster home. And then he went straight from the foster home to like a halfway house, as far as I know. And that's about all I know from his past, because he never spoke about it. He'd always want to look forward, not backwards.
Yeah. The only thing he said to me about his past, about this boyfriend he had years ago that wore like a cowboy hat, and that's where his cowboy hat come from. Some man in the past. Like I say, he didn't like to talk about the past.
But you did gather that he was abused, that he had abuse in his childhood.
Oh yeah, he's spoken to me about it. Honestly, it used to break him when he spoke about it. That's why we never asked. Like, you never ask him questions when he got upset, because it just used to like roll. And it'd be like 3 days of him just bawling his eyes out, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
These then were some of the forces exerting themselves inside the mind of James Parker. Forces that might start to explain his bizarre behaviour.
He wanted to be what was expected of him, but we never expected anything of him.
Wow.
And maybe that's why he felt so happy to be going to Dubai, a place where his past could be forgotten, at least fleetingly. The only problem was, as much as he might have tried to forget about the world hadn't forgotten about him. CoinSpot had not forgotten James Parker, who'd been living it up in Dubai, buying villas from Russians until that phone call.
As he's gone over there, CoinSpot have called him. They've turned around and said, you owe us 29 million Australian dollars. Well, that's when I started shitting myself.
Ah yes, CoinSpot, the cryptocurrency trading website based not in Dubai, but in Australia.
Well, look, I first noticed CoinSpot, I think, when it signed a deal to be a sponsor of the Western Bulldogs Aussie rules team.
This is Melbourne finance journalist John Stenscholz, whose job it is to get the scoops on Australia's richest people. He's got a rapier-sharp eye for the money scene there. And so when, a few years ago, this new Bitcoin platform, CoinSpot, seemed to have emerged from nowhere, his curiosity was piqued. So he started digging.
And all of a sudden, this brand called CoinSpot comes along. And I was probably amongst a lot of other people wondering, who are these people? And it was extraordinary what I saw. Russell Wilson, the majority owner of the company, shared in something like 500 or 600 million Australian dollars worth of dividends. The company was making just about that much again in profits. Suddenly this Wilson, who hardly anyone would have heard of ever, emerged as one of Australia's highest paid owners of companies, and clearly he was very, very, very wealthy. But hardly anything was known about him.
It is an astonishing firm, an early success of the Bitcoin era, moneyed now beyond belief, but with none of the real zeal or trappings of the more well-known big tech firms. No modern-day robber baron wading into politics, courting notoriety. In fact, quite the opposite.
The corporate headquarters is this small building that's pretty close to town, but it shares the building with businesses as well. There's a remedial massage therapist in the building too, and a Pilates studio. He remains extremely elusive. And it's hard to tell exactly how many people work there because hardly anything shows up on LinkedIn. There's no one bragging about working at CoinSpot.
Its reclusive boss, Russell Wilson, had phoned Parker directly. He'd lost millions at Parker's hands, and he wanted it back. But perhaps, as befits such an enigmatic company, he was ready to make a deal, a low-key one, a combination of carrot and stick, as James Parker himself would later relay.
This guy is called from Australia. He said, I've appropriated these Bitcoin and he wants X amount back. And he said, I'll have to settle. And he went, right. So then he managed to get his phone number and then he started talking to him. And that Russell called me a criminal.
Who said you had to settle?
Russell.
Okay.
He said, well, you'll have to settle.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was a negotiation from start to finish once he phoned me. And
so how much?
Then he called me a criminal on the phone. And I said to him, I'm not speaking to you no more. I said, I'm not a criminal, done nothing wrong. If you want to do anything to do with this, you need to do negotiations with Steve and only Steve, because I'm not speaking to you anymore and I've never spoken to the guy ever since.
Okay.
Russell Wilson emailed Parker at the very start of their Dubai holiday. He laid out that Parker's glitch had siphoned off nearly 40 million Australian dollars worth of cryptocurrency from his site, and that CoinSpot were ready to pursue criminal and civil charges. But what would be vastly preferable would be an arrangement. CoinSpot could see the extraordinary amount of Bitcoin he and the others had glitched from them, more than 2,000. And if Parker would just return most of them, he could keep some. Not bad going at all in a deal to make the whole affair just quietly disappear. No prosecution. It just goes away. Parker's aide, Stephen Boyes, took over negotiating with CoinSpot directly, and eventually they came to terms.
It's absolutely legally binding, done by a law firm in Australia. Just from what Steve told me, he said he's got a team of lawyers working on it, blah, blah, blah. It's bulletproof, blah, blah, blah. Sign it, pay it, done.
So by returning the 436 Bitcoin, you thought that
was it. We settled.
Protect
when
you.
You settle, you settle, don't you? And that's it. You just settle for whatever they want.
Okay.
And the settlement figure came out at 436, and that was it. Settled, done.
Okay. So you return 436, signing this contract, and you think that protects you from criminal prosecution?
Yes.
Look, I think a lot of it with that is probably saving saving the reputation of the company.
John Stensholt again, who's seen many fraught situations like these in business.
If it gets out that they've been hacked, and it sounds like it's pretty easy to hack, then, I'm not sure what the online or crypto equivalent of a run on a bank is, but it probably, could end up with that sort of situation. I think clearly, security and reputation would have been foremost of it in his mind at the time.
So, while meeting Russians about villas, snapping gold bars on beds, and getting $1 million in cash in Dubai, Stephen Boys had also been playing hardball with CoinSpot, telling them that James couldn't repay $1,700. No, it'd be more like $436, given how many had apparently already been spent. A figure that CoinSpot actually agreed to. Talk about the art of the deal.
He agreed to settle with him, and I agreed to help him. And I agreed to help Russell Wilson, who was more than thankful in emails and telephone calls to me for all the help in negotiating the settlement on his behalf. He said we wouldn't have been able to do it without you.
Of course, we've tried to get in touch with CoinSpot and Mr. Wilson, but unfortunately, they haven't responded. What's important, though, is that all of this allowed James Parker and Stephen Boys to return from Dubai, and just imagine their relief. Parker's glitch had been rumbled, but thanks to Stephen Boys, he'd been able to keep several hundred Bitcoin, not to mention cash, gold, and a clutch of villas to boot, and who knows what else. And just like Dalboy, he would always look after Rodney.
He did look after me financially. After the CoinSpot settlement, he gave me close on £1 million. He said, I wouldn't have had it if you hadn't have settled with him. And I said, well, I'll accept it, but I'll use that money to build a property portfolio for you when we get back to the UK.
You say you had not heard about the glitch. This has all come totally as news to you. You've got James there admitting wrongdoing, effectively admitting that
dishonesty.
to you. Dishonesty, wrongdoing, whatever it is. You've got the CEO of a big company on the phone alleging fraud. You're in Dubai, surrounded by this gold, these watches. You must have had at least a suspicion that this was wrong, potentially illegal. Why didn't you just walk away at that point?
I knew as soon as he told me about the glitch that it was wrong then.
Illegal? You thought it was illegal?
I thought it was dishonest of what he'd done. He should have owned up and told Russell Wilson and CoinSpot about the glitch as soon as he realised that it falsely credited him, and that could have been the end of it, but he didn't. He decided to tell other people about it, and he decided to continue to exploit the glitch on an industrial scale.
Do you understand why some people listening will think you didn't walk away because you wanted part of the proceeds?
I was helping my client settle a civil agreement, and I was helping Russell Wilson as well.
But not everyone was in the same position. Stephen Boy's deal had meant a frantic scramble to get everyone else's Bitcoin back.
Mum had mentioned something about the website getting in touch. Their IP addresses were blocked from the website. That was the first thing that happened. I remember my mum being very stressed and panicked at that moment. Not because she had lost access to them, but because James, under Stephen's word, was being very unfair with the distribution of how much each person should pay. She was obviously stressed out about that because she was planning for our future. She was actually in contact with solicitors about how to cash out these Bitcoins in a legal way. She wanted to pay tax on them. She wanted it to be a legitimate venture so that she could then buy a house and get us out of the situation that we were in. So that was incredibly stressful.
It must have sent panic around everybody.
Everybody was really panicked.
But doesn't this show, in a way, Dave, what an unusual kind of fraudster he was? It may have felt to him, at least, and it may feel like to some people listening, that it was a victimless crime. Lancashire Police Detective David Wainwright.
That is other people's money he's spending. CoinSpot have to honour other people's trades. People investing in crypto like they do stocks and shares. people have legitimately made a lot of money investing in Bitcoin. Well, that's other people's money he's taking.
And talking of other people's money,
the vast proportion of all of my Bitcoins went straight back to James when the CoinSpot thing came on top. Because I said to him, I said, you can have everything back. He said, no, I don't want all of it. I said, well, I want you to have it. I was scared at that point. I was very scared because I finally realised what I had dipped my toe into, so to speak.
More than a dip, it's a bit of a plunge.
Panic, though, affects us all in different ways. Whether James Parker was truly panicked or not is hard to say. The glitch was now gone, and a fragile deal was holding with CoinSpot to keep it all quiet. But while James's friends were drowning in their own fears about what could happen next and having to hastily find Bitcoin to give back, James kept the money flowing. The reason? Because deal or no deal, plenty of his dodgy Bitcoin had already been converted to cash through their man Jamal in Dubai.
And when he came back in March, he had a kilo bar of gold. So he got worried and got scared that he was going to get robbed for all this money. So he went to Jade Jewelers, sold the gold bar. As I say, I think he got 25,000 for that. And then he had countless coins to the value of, again, about 23,000.
And by the time they were home, James was once again out on the town, throwing his money around again, but even more widely now, harder and faster than he'd ever done before.
So I refused to go to the casino. I didn't want to go there anymore. I was like, why? What's all this, trying to fill the day up?
His friend, Amy Burgess.
I just sort of rocked the boat a lot because I couldn't understand wasting all this money, this stupidity of everything.
30 grand when I saw him withdraw one night. He'd done that at every casino in Blackpool.
He'd sort of gone off the rails when we got back from Dubai. He then started gambling, drinking more heavily, being extravagant with gifts and cars and jewellery.
Were you concerned that he was just sort of drawing attention to himself, to what had happened?
I was, and he did do that, certainly in the casinos. He'd sort of bet big and win big. One particular case, I saw him give the croupier a £1,000 tip, throw his hands up in the air, drinks for everybody, that sort of thing. And I think that's when he did draw attention to himself.
But not everything was entirely frivolous. Just as he'd moved Kelly Caton into the hotel to give her some respite from the cold and the damp of her Blackpool home, he now wanted to go one further. He'd spotted a big house up near Fleetwood, and he wanted to make sure that Kelly could live in it permanently. Okay, so it wasn't a villa in Dubai, but it was nice. Again, James, in his own words.
I meet a bunch of people. I'm kind of generous guy. I want to help them out. Then I'm given the tools to help them out. And the purchase of that house was not for me, it was for a family that live in Blackpool, in a damp-ridden house, absolutely filthy, disgusting house, and I wanted to help them. So Steve bought that house in the company's name, which we then was going to buy the house back from the company with Bitcoin, and they turned it down. They said, no, don't want it. There you go.
Is this Kelly Caton?
Is it Kelly Caton?
That's what I asked you.
Could be. That is her.
Why did she turn it down?
Don't know, she's weird.
By now, though, Kelly Caton was becoming wary, scared about what it all might mean.
They wanted us to get this house no matter how many times I told them that we could not live in Fleetwood. It was totally logistically impossible for us to live there. I mean, when it first came up about getting us a house, we thought it was to be rented, which, was probably a bit more doable. But then they insisted, no, we're getting it for you, it's going to be in your name. And I'm like, no, that's ridiculous. I was getting phone calls as well. No, you said you wanted the house, we're going to get you the house. I'm in the estate agent now, you're going to have to pay for this house. I don't want the house. And they just kept phoning and phoning and phoning, and that's when I cut off contact from them completely. I couldn't make any decisions for myself. Just put my foot down, no.
So it's around about this time that you've cut ties with them all?
Absolutely, yeah.
Stephen Boys, meanwhile, was in a rage. This is quite difficult, I'm sure, but I wanted to show you this. For listeners, this is a note from Stephen Boys about you and your mum. And it says this: James, being James, wanted a nice house for Kelly and her kids to get them out of the damp house they currently rent. I cannot believe how ungrateful and selfish some people are. They're just scum. They don't deserve James's concern about them, as they have just no respect or gratitude for what James was trying to do for them. I've washed my hands of them. I want nothing to do with them. How do you feel about that? I mean, he's calling you and your mum scum.
I think that's a testament to Stephen's character. The idea of categorising a vulnerable woman, single mother, as scum feels very classist. Stephen was absolutely the catalyst to James and my mum falling out. He was very controlling. And my mum didn't let him. She just didn't let him do that. She wanted to be friends with James. That was the long and short of it. So although it's difficult to hear that, it's also quite laughable, because what I think is scummy is holding yourself higher than somebody else because of the financial situation they have found themselves in.
You've mentioned the Catons. There is a text message where you sound very annoyed with them for refusing the house that was offered. It looks like in that message that you call them scum, ungrateful, selfish. Is that what you still think? Is that what they are?
Some of the people that he gave things to, I could see straight through them. They weren't interested in James as a person. They were just interested in what they could get out of it for themselves, really. And some of those I did refer to as not nice people.
Scum?
I don't think I used the word scum, but if you're saying I did, yeah.
Do you think it's appropriate? Ungrateful, selfish, you think that's what they are?
Some of them were, yeah, definitely.
He really gave the impression that he just knew more than everybody else around him. Yeah, the air of arrogance was thick around Stephen.
So James Parker was left with a huge house in Fleetwood on his hands, and his friendships suddenly all seeming so much less solid, so much less certain, which was making James furious.
When the group sort of split and my mum was pushed to the side, she definitely saw that. She was getting abusive messages and phone calls from him. At that time, I wasn't living at home, so I don't know exactly what was said. But there were instances when I saw that. If somebody wronged him, he was very quick to anger, and he held on to it as well. He would rant about it for days afterwards, just at the most random moments. He didn't like to be disrespected. That was his main thing. If he felt like he was being disrespected, that's what made him fly off the handle.
Even his would-be business partner, Stephen Boys, was by now tearing his hair out at James's reckless spending of the vast amounts of the remaining Dubai money. These are some of the texts Boys was sending to James at the time.
We agreed no more cars when we got back from Dubai. You just ignored my advice and continued to buy cars for people.
But James, too, was in a funk of his own over something else, a luxury watch. It was just another absurdity that Boys couldn't believe, as he wrote to Jamal.
Hi, Jamal. I saw James again today. Found out that he smashed up the watch you bought him as a gift with a hammer and then thrown the present I bought him from Dubai in the bin, just because of the mix-up with the watches. What an ungrateful, spoiled, childish act of temper. It's just designed to upset me and you. It's upset me a lot. I'm not sure how you feel about it, but I'm starting to see the real James Parker. It's not good, mate.
Even the friend he treated like a daughter, Loretta Barlow, wasn't immune from James's anger.
He rang me once and told me he was going to throw himself out of the car because he couldn't handle having the money anymore because everyone was just on him all the time. And then I spoke to the two people that were looking after him. I told them that he had mental health and he needed watching, and that's when James didn't really want to speak to me anymore. He felt like I'd told everyone that he was vulnerable. Well, I was trying to emphasise that he needed to be watched.
And him and Steve were arguing. Me and Jordan were arguing. And the spending was a bit silly. And I'd be like telling James off. And like say everybody was bowing down to James and I'd be telling him off all the time, which James didn't like that. Rubbed James up the wrong way. I just thought it was wasteful and stupid. I was really gutted about it. I was gutted. This money and all this nonsense. Our friendship had gone.
But one did stay loyal. Jordan Robinson, who by now had quit his bar job at the hotel to be James's new personal assistant full-time.
Even with the funds he had, I told him, you're not going to live out your days with the way that you spend. If you want to live the rest of your days happily, spend it less frivolously.
But then there was Kelly, cast aside by an unforgiving James. She was back once again in the cold and damp of her troubled home, where something would happen between her and her daughter Kimmy that would change everything for everyone. As far as Stephen Boyes and James Parker were concerned, their deal with CoinSpot was holding fast. No one, certainly not the police, knew anything about it. They thought any worry about a Rumble glitch was all behind them.
And that was the plan. Until, obviously, what happened with Miss Caton and her daughter.
CoinSpot had found Parker for sure, which, as we've seen, had yielded chaos for him and for his erstwhile friends. But around Blackpool, Detective Zane was oblivious to any of that. With nothing to go on except the certain knowledge that something wasn't right, he had no investigation, no one to prosecute, not even a crime that he could see, much less arrest anyone for. Just a strange, rich man and a strange financial advisor. But just when it seems like there's nowhere else to go for Zane, the most bizarre thing in this whole story happens. It sounds simple. Kelly Caton had lost her phone.
That particular evening, I put the phone on charge in the living room, so when I walked through the living room, the first thing I noticed was my phone wasn't there.
But this, remember, is the phone of someone who's been shown a rather special glitch.
So I accused Kimberly of taking the phone because there's no earthly way that my phone wouldn't have been there. She denied it, and I told her that I knew she'd taken it. Very lengthy row ensued. I'd say 3 or 4 days later, I was changing my Google password because I knew she had my phone, she had access to my emails. The email popped up that the Bitcoin had been taken from my account that was on my phone.
Kelly Caton hadn't lost her phone. Her daughter, Kimberly, had taken it. And more than that, she'd helped herself to 15 Bitcoin from her mum's online wallet. And this is where the sort of thing you can't quite credit really happens. Kelly Caton herself called the police to say that 15 of her Bitcoin had been stolen. Why on earth would you do that, knowing full well where it came from? Well, to be honest, I have no idea. But once again, a curious call about a Bitcoin theft crossed the desk of Detective Zane Al-Haq, who, of course, put his coat on.
Kelly's house was a council flat in quite a rundown area of Blackpool. When I went in the house, it was in quite a state. The house was awful. I couldn't sit down.
Just as with his Parker encounter, Zane was about to meet someone else strangely familiar with Bitcoin. Kelly's home was not the typical place that someone with a few Bitcoin or any serious asset might live. And Kelly's explanations of how she came by them in the first place sounded every bit as improbable as that which Parker had said about his some months back. She'd had 15 stolen, then worth 70 odd grand. Nonetheless, Zane heard her out. However she'd obtained them, they were now with her daughter, Kimmy. Zane's brain was again doing somersaults. 2 stories about this weird thing, Bitcoin, in the same town, months apart, and each as dubious as the other. Oh, and there was another problem. Kimberly was nowhere to be found.
Where is Kimberly?
I've no idea.
September 2018. Once again, holed up in her cold, mildewed bedroom, Kelly Caton hadn't seen James Parker in months. The days in the Grand Hotel in North Euston were now but memory. The friendship that had been born in its bars and ballrooms had, by now, completely disintegrated. James had bought a big house he wanted her to live in, but when she'd become scared and walked away from it, he was every bit as through with her as she was with him. As part of the deal to make CoinSpot overlook their theft, she'd given back 150 bitcoins for Parker and boys to return. But that wasn't all of the Bitcoin that the glitch had given her. She used plenty already on store cards and had more to spend. Which brings us back to that phone call to the police. Her daughter, Kimmy, she said, had stolen some from her. But stealing, well, that's not what Kimmy says happened.
I didn't steal. Mum had previously gifted some Bitcoin to me and then taken them back after an argument that we had had. So when she asked me to leave the family home and, for all intents and purposes made me homeless, I reclaimed those. You can't gift something to someone and then take it back. If I gave you a car and then next week said, oh, actually, I want it back, I don't have any legal recourse to do that. So that's really what happened. And she reported that to the police as a theft.
With no one else to turn to, Kimmy called in to the first solicitors she saw and set out the predicament that she was in. She says the gentleman was patient and listened carefully to her odd story. But of course, he was curious about the obvious question. How did her mum even come by these Bitcoin in the first place?
And when I explained that to my solicitor, he said, Kimmy, that's stealing. That's black and white fraud. And I was really taken aback. And
You didn't think, it hadn't occurred to you that might be the case?
No, I really parroted my mum's explanation for it, which I truly and honestly believed, which was...
And just to be clear, what did she always say it was?
It was just a glitch. It's not illegal to exploit a glitch.
It's their problem.
Yeah, basically that. If the developers didn't want it to be there, it wouldn't be there. I almost argued back with him and he laid it out for me at that point. He said, no, this is theft. You need to tell the police about this, particularly if they are wanting to talk to you about this other issue. So when I found that out, it was like my world collapsed around me.
It took him 2 whole months, but Detective Zane eventually tracked her down to a Blackpool flat where he arrested her on suspicion of theft and fraud. And then you're sat at a police station contemplating
Yep.
what could be just the most terrible event.
Yeah, I was terrified. I was panicking. I mean, they struggled to get my fingerprints because I was shaking so hard from anxiety.
Did you think this is it? I'm going to jail here.
Yeah, pretty much. I was petrified. I felt like a child in that moment. Really scared. I didn't have my parents to turn to. I didn't have anybody around me to turn to. Just completely alone.
In the interview room, Zane at last had his chance. He asked Kimmy where on earth all her mother's Bitcoin had come from. The answer: Parker.
So obviously I'd already put 2 and 2 together, and this is exactly what I'd been waiting for. I found it hard to contain my excitement learning this.
Kimmy was released, and it's important to say, at this stage, she has never been charged with any crime. It was, however, the straw that broke the camel's back with her mum, Kelly, to whom she hasn't now spoken in the 6 years since all of this took place.
I would wake up having panic attacks. And part of it was being involved with the police and just the fear that comes from that when you've never been in that position before. But the other side of it was really losing my family. And it's really difficult to mourn somebody who's still alive.
Now, think of all the best police dramas on TV. The Wire maybe, or Line of Duty, that sort of thing. One determined, noble officer in a long tan coat who just can't let something go. His methods might be unconventional, but by God, he gets results. And this hard-drinking, hard-boiled maverick will throw in his badge if the top brass try and stop him. Well, Zayn ul-Haq is absolutely nothing like that. Instead, he acted in a way which was, if anything, more heroic, certainly more dogged at the least.
Whenever I had a spare moment, I would then pick up and then continue my inquiries here. And there's no other case that I've come across where it has just offended my nature. Everything about justice, everything about right and wrong, I wanted to get to the bottom of it.
And quite out of the blue, one of our colleagues from the cybercrime unit came to see me about this unusual job. At first, I didn't believe it. I thought this must be a mistake.
Zayn cracked open his spreadsheet and personally contacted almost every cryptocurrency exchange then active in the entire world to see if they'd been stung out of money. Day after day, rejection after rejection, he logged their answers.
Until one of them put the hand up and said, yeah, we've lost 40 million Australian dollars. Can you help us, please?
40 million. I mean, your jaws must have hit the floor.
You think, no, that's not right. You've put a decimal point in the wrong place.
The name of the exchange? CoinSpot. The last one on Zayn's list, because it was in Australia, on the other side of the planet.
So I start ringing a few banks, and the numbers were just astronomical. People who were unemployed, who had millions of pounds in the bank. And all of a sudden, over the period of a couple of days, we think, oh, we've touched upon something here.
An operation had now begun. Operation Eucalyptus. Whether it was something to do with koalas or Australia or one of those vile herbal teas is lost to history. But what's important is that David Wainwright was about to go at it with every bit as much determination as his colleague Zayn. I was last here when we dropped into the North Euston Hotel, but James Parker was long gone from its corner bar by now. On the outskirts of the town, though, sits a large, detached house with a balcony above the door, pleasant bow windows on each side, and like many a house by the sea, it even has its own name, Four Winds. The view? Gorgeous, really. Only the green of a golf course separates it from the sea. It was the house James had bought for Kelly. The one she didn't want, where after Dubai, James Parker himself moved in. But following after him, like seagulls after the trawler, were hangers-on. Whether they were from his madcap sessions at the casinos or the bars, James's liberty in spending was attracting attention. He was being watched. Something that would be the end of his friendship with the one person he was genuinely closest to.
That's why I got screamed at and told never to come round again. Because I tried talking to him about everyone taking advantage of him and he just wouldn't hear it, would he?
Yeah.
So, well, what happened?
He went to Dubai. And when he got back, I went round to see him. And he just started screaming and shouting at me. So everyone was screaming at me and James was just dead silent. So I left. Because it wasn't worth upsetting James. And I just said to him, you know where I am if you need me. And I just didn't speak to him again. It was too much while I had my daughter and I was trying to look after James. But money changed him. Money definitely changed him.
She needed to be pushed out because she was too close to James. If it was just her and James, James would listen to her. Once Loretta was out the way, they could do what they wanted with him.
You, Loretta, must have felt very hurt by that, given how close you'd been before.
I cried for days. But I just couldn't. Like, I was still obviously keeping tabs on him while I wasn't speaking to him. I still knew what was going on.
Yeah.
I couldn't put myself through that. My mental health wasn't right. And neither was James's, and it had just caused more damage if I'd have stood there arguing. It wouldn't have been worth arguing for.
But what did he say to you? And what did you say
He
to
didn't say anything.
Right.
It was Jordan.
Right.
And
You couldn't even get to him.
no, I walked in his front room, and he had loads of boxes on the table that he'd brought me from Dubai. And he started telling me I was only there for the money and everything. I was like, no, I'm not. Like, I'm really not.
What was in the boxes?
He bought me some jewellery, but I left it all there and left because everyone was screaming at me saying that I was taking advantage. So I just left everything.
It was like a battle. Everybody wanted him. And James's dream was, oh yeah, where's my money? I want to buy a street and we can all live together in this little communion, do you know what I mean? But it wasn't it. Everybody was like, I want him. And it wasn't like that.
Someone told us that he just wanted a family and that other people took advantage of him. What would you say to that?
No, he picked people up and he put them down. I can't think of anyone in our timeline who he stayed friends with throughout. At some point, everyone is picked up and put down. Everyone.
And that would, of course, come to include the man in charge of his money, Stephen Boys. He and James had set up a company together to invest James's money. A company with a grand, yet inconspicuous name, Total Financial Planning Services Limited. But it was Stephen Boys that controlled their little company, and James now saw the implications.
So I said, I want it in my name, don't want it in the company's name, because he had 51% of the company, could have evicted me, kicked me out onto the street, and was renting the other properties out. So I would have had nowhere to go, so it was more for my security. And when it comes to signing for that property, he was very crafty. Yeah.
In the end, he came to distrust you. Is that true?
No.
He didn't distrust you?
No, he didn't distrust me at all. No.
But you did fall out?
We did fall out, yeah. And there's reasons for that, which I'd rather not go into. But it had nothing to do with the trust issue.
James Parker's getting worried. Look at this text he sent. I've been waiting over a month for my house to be in my name for my peace of mind and security, as I have nowhere else I can fucking go. If I lose this, I have nowhere. I thought this would have been your main priority, not swanning off to concerts and having days out. And here's Boys texting Jamal in Dubai, who he's still all pals with. I feel our relationship is fast drawing to its end, Jamal. I cannot sit by and watch him destroy everything I've worked so hard to achieve for him to date. He does not really appreciate me or my advice or efforts on his behalf. So I feel I'm wasting my time and efforts on trying to secure his incomes and keep him safe.
He just stopped listening to me then. I was trying to build him a property portfolio at that stage to get him a residual income. The way I phrased it was, don't eat the chickens, eat the eggs from the chickens. But he stopped listening to me then, and that's when I decided that we'd go our separate ways and we parted company.
I mean, while we're on Boys, something that's clear in his communications, Boys that is that he genuinely seems to see himself as kind of a decent guy, right? Who is doing his best for his client against the banks, and that they don't really understand crypto. And he's got a client who's spending recklessly and they don't understand that. Might that be true? Is there any credibility to that?
No. He knew where his client's wealth came from. There was text messages where he was talking about paying off corrupt officials in Dubai to keep bank accounts open. He knew exactly what he was doing. He was greedy. He took control of the criminal operation. He put himself right in the centre of it, to the point where he was running Parker's life for him. He was controlling where his money went, controlling the flow of money around the world, and getting paid very handsomely on the back of it. So what was he in possession of?
£1.5 million that we set up a company with.
Is this sterling now, or?
Yes, sterling.
And what bank account was that in?
I don't know.
Was it in a UK or a Dubai account?
I don't know.
Do you think he was controlling Parker?
Definitely.
So you've got a situation where you're saying Parker was controlling others, kind of beneath him in a way, through the wealth that he had. But then Boys is sort of above him, controlling him.
What Boys had done is he'd drawn up agreements between him and Parker, whereby he had a 51% stake in this bogus company they set up in the UK, supposedly a property rental company. Well, the wealth all comes from Mr. Parker. It's his money. Boys is supposedly the employee helping him set up and run the company, but Boys has given himself a controlling stake in that company. Totally took over control.
But the house was nothing compared to the amount of Parker's Bitcoin money that Stephen Boys had, air quotes, managed.
I don't class people as being untrustworthy till they become untrustworthy. Then I go, bye-bye, Stephen Boys.
But as one door closes, of course, another opens. By now, Detectives Zane Ul-Haq and David Wainwright had pieced together as much as they possibly could have about the case. Operation Eucalyptus, after being stuck in quicksand for so long, was about to finally move. And quickly. Raids were authorised on the houses of Kelly Caton, Jordan Robinson, Stephen Boys, and of course, James Parker, in order to retrieve, well, that was the question. How do you retrieve something like Bitcoin that doesn't actually physically exist?
The risks were huge. All it would take was for somebody to get wind that the police are coming, for them to either move the funds from one wallet to another, or to turn the mobile phones off, or turn the computers off. So it would be essentially out of our reach.
At the time, we didn't know what we didn't know, so we arrived at Kelly Caton's house, and unlocked and open on a laptop was her crypto account. No two-factor authentication, no password protection. So within a minute or two, we took 88 Bitcoin off her, and we're thinking, my goodness, that's worth hundreds of thousands of pounds.
On Kelly Caton's open laptop, in the penury of her surroundings, sat an astonishing 88 Bitcoin, worth then £688,000. Then it was James's turn to feel police boots on his door. And what was his reaction when you battered down the door?
He was angry. Bitter, angry. He was instructed by his solicitor not to talk to us, although he clearly wanted to. When I served the POCA, the asset recovery paperwork on him, he took it off me and threw it on the floor.
And inside?
A huge telly, drones, remote control, speedboats and cars. He'd clearly had more money than he knew what to do with. So I recall he had this wine cooler. This thing was massive. I could fit in it twice, and I'm 6'1", and he's got this massive wine cooler that cost thousands of pounds, filled with bottles of wine that I recognise because it comes from Aldi. So he had extortionate wealth, but he didn't really know how to spend it.
So he had this enormous wine cooler.
Yep.
But it was full of Aldi wine.
Yes. And me and the search team all laughed because we all recognised the wine that comes from Aldi.
It is such an image, isn't it?
We had him in for subsequent interviews as we learnt more about the case, and he did talk to us a little bit thereafter.
What kind of interviewee was he?
Rude, arrogant, angry, tried to claim he'd done nothing wrong, tried to blame Stephen Boys. Well, he's the one with letters after his name. I assumed it was all fine. Green and clean, he believed that the money was.
Green and clean?
Green and clean is the phrase that Boys allegedly told Parker about their ill-gotten gains.
As far as I was concerned, it was settled. There was no grievance. There was nothing, no harm, no foul, according to what the contract said. And that was it. I don't understand why you get so upset about it.
They say it's pointless trying to argue with a stupid person. James Parker was not stupid. Far from it. And that was clear. But he was confusing, confounding. From his point of view, yes, this probably made sense. They had made an agreement with CoinSpot and they had returned more than 400 Bitcoin to make it all go away. This was job already done. What Zainul Haq and David Wainwright saw, however, was money laundering. And ironically, given Parker's flippant attitude to his glitched wealth, the effort it took them to prove it would take a huge toll as days turned into months and months turned into years.
It began to take over. So originally I was told, you've got a month away from your other jobs, crack this and then go back to your normal daily life. But as the job mushroomed, as we learnt more, my other jobs were then reallocated to other people. And this is all I worked on for years. The trawling of phones, the examination of digital material, the recovery of crypto from other countries. I would wake up at 3 a.m. and think, oh, that's what that text message means. And then I'd have to somehow write it on my hand. So when I got to work the next morning, I would know that line of inquiry that related to a text message that up until that point I didn't understand. It was all consuming. It was all consuming for a long time.
I mean, you say it took over your life, and did it affect your personal life?
Yeah. Quite embarrassingly. Towards the latter stages of the case, my mum became quite ill. And I'd visit her in hospital, but I'd take the laptop with me, and when she went to sleep, I'd just work on a quick disclosure issue for an hour while she had a rest. Something that I deeply regret now, but allowed me to keep on top of a very fast evolving case. Because I'm the only cop involved in the case, when you build up towards court, there are multiple defence teams emailing me queries and challenges that only I can answer. So that laptop stayed with me and was sometimes beyond late at night and weekends or hospital with me mum, just so I can keep the case up and running. So to keep that moving whilst doing the school run, visiting me mum, the laptop stayed with me.
What do you think when you look back at that now?
It's really sad. Those moments with me mum I should have enjoyed more.
Look, this is the reality of the detailed work it takes to prove any kind of financial crime. And just looking through the amount of transactions David and Zane had to analyse, it really is, it's baffling. There were periods where Parker and Boys were getting drip feeds of thousands after thousands in planned sequences into their bank accounts, emails that show that Stephen Boys explaining how he haplessly tried to get a Dubai bank to speed up the opening of new accounts. Quote, more bribes needed, he complains. It's costing me a fortune. 200 grand into one account, 300 grand just a while later. It's head spinning. Yet these weren't professional con artists. They were not hackers. These were not sophisticated criminal conspirators in any shape or form.
These were bungling idiots. They didn't make any effort to cover the tracks, probably through arrogance and inexperience as criminals. That part of the problem I had was the volume of evidence, not the lack of it.
Not least because in the middle of James's chaotic spending spree, there had, of course, been time for one last car. A Chrysler Voyager, no less. And bought cash, of course. But just when the police think they've got chapter and verse, James Parker will have one last surprise. But here's a question. Should they have been raided? Because wasn't there a deal with CoinSpot?
I don't believe the contract protects you from criminal prosecution.
Why?
That's just how the law works.
And how the law works is that glitching cryptocurrency from the platform, moving it through Dubai, converting it into cash, gold, villas, and later cars, casinos, store vouchers, and let's not forget fridgefuls of Aldi wine, is criminal. They were all charged with transferring and converting stolen goods. And at a trial in 2022, a jury gave their judgment. Jamal, the Dubai money man, he flew over to stand trial with the others. He wasn't convicted. But as for the rest of them, Kelly Caton was jailed for 4.5 years.
I honestly didn't think it was illegal.
Jordan Robinson, jailed for 4.5 years.
All he ever kept saying to us is, it's all above board. It's a glitch in their system. And I decided, stupidly, I'll listen to this man. And I'll believe whatever he says.
Stephen Boys, a professional financial advisor who should have been aware of his responsibilities, well, he really got the book thrown at him. He, of course, had never used the glitch himself, but for his role in transferring and converting stolen property, he was given 6 years in jail. You and others went to prison. Should you have gone to prison?
No. I'm innocent. I've maintained my innocence from the get-go. I didn't learn about the glitch until January 2018. Prior to that, I'd done everything I could have done correctly.
So you think you've been unfairly treated?
Definitely.
Do you think you've been the victim of a miscarriage of justice?
Definitely. 100% I have.
He knew straight away where that money came from.
And I suppose, in a way, he would have been a pretty poor financial advisor if he hadn't.
Of course. He was clever enough not to use the glitch himself, but he wanted part of the pie.
But someone else wasn't convicted. The enigma, the unlikely man at the centre of everything, who once again confounds everything and everyone. Way back at the start of this, when we introduced you to James Parker, it was as a down-and-out guy whose two main pastimes were drinking and smoking. And I mentioned the cough. The truth is, it was far worse than just a cough. He was a very ill man, and he knew it. He had lung disease, a serious disease called COPD. So much so that he'd even hinted about it during the interviews after his arrest. Do you think he knew that he was done for?
Yeah, and because of his ill health, I don't think he really cared.
Detective Sergeant David Wainwright.
The last time I interviewed James Parker, he told me, I will die soon. And he didn't care about any consequences. And it was true.
I can remember the last time I saw him.
Kimmy Caton.
Me and my friend, his almost surrogate daughter, we went round there for dinner one night. And it was just something really simple, bread rolls and a roast chicken and some stuffing and just making your own sandwiches. And we just sat together and had a nice dinner. And yeah, I'm pretty sure that was the last time I ever saw him.
These were, of course, happier times, long before this band of friends had scattered, had turned on each other, pulled apart by fear and fury. His other friends, Amy and Loretta, had also been told to get out of his life. But in the year before he died, they had tried to reach him, as his big house had turned into a free-for-all of hangers-on.
At one point, we went and knocked on his door, didn't we?
Yeah, I banged on the door.
And you could see it. We were like, just come out a minute.
He was so frail.
He was scared, wasn't he?
And his face was all sunk in at the sides and his eyes were dull.
And we said, just come and sit on the doorstep with us. Just come and talk to us. He's like, I can't talk to you. And then he went. But you could see he desperately wanted to talk to us. But what could we do? So we walked away. We did try and help him. But like you say, what can you do?
You can't make someone take help that they don't want. There was no forcing him. And I have never felt that sort of, like being hit in the chest with a plank. It was horrible.
As the police continued paring down his devices one by one, meticulously gathering evidence to prepare everything for trial, James Parker's health continued to decline. And though he discarded her sometime before, as he neared the end of his life, James Parker would make a phone call to the one person he knew would come back to him, the person who'd been there for him from the beginning.
And he must have been in the house on his own. He had no money, he had no food, he had no Wi-Fi, he had nothing. And he phoned me up one night drunk, and he was like, come up and see me. And so I'd gone there. There was no food in the cupboard. There was a couple, supposedly he was paying this woman to clean, and she was buying him custard all the time, and he was living off custard. Everything had been stripped out of the house. He had a little projector on the wall that he'd watched films and stuff on, like Freeview thing. And it was just, I couldn't believe it. I thought, all that money, this is what you've been left with. And all these people have took everything. It was just shocking. It absolutely was.
Amy began helping him again as best she could, until one night when she left him for the last time.
So I thought, oh, you'll be all right for a day. And when I left him packs of water by his bed and everything. And I got him a thing so he could pee in and everything because he's struggling to get out of bed and all that. He was bad at that point. And I left all food by him and drinks, you know what I mean? I organised him before I went. And then, so the day after, I've gone up there, banging on the doors, nothing. No answer or anything. I'm thinking, something's wrong, do you know what I mean? I must have phoned the police up. And then I started to panic. And then they sent a policeman up that come to the door and he was like, oh no, he passed away yesterday. Before I went, he said to me, I feel a bit scared. And I kicked myself now and I think I should have stayed there the night with him. I should have stayed on the sofa and then I'd have been there. I could have got an ambulance for him, do you know what I mean? There would have been someone there. But I wasn't ready for it.
I have James Parker's death certificate here. Date of death, 10th of January, 2021. It says here, occupation, computer-aided design craftsman. Well, you can say that again.
He told me he'd spent years sat in his little flat, drinking and smoking, so COPD was clearly getting the better of him. And when he told me, I'll die soon, it was obvious he believed it and subsequently turned out to be correct.
How did you feel about that? Did you feel cheated by it, in a way?
To an extent, yeah, it's disappointing because the main man won't have his moment in court. So the best I got from the end of it was the jury decided that Parker was dishonest, therefore he would have been convicted, and the value of money he was responsible for, he would have ended up with a massive prison sentence.
How long do you think he'd have got?
12 years.
People, local press, national press, they've talked about this being a gang or a heist. Do you think that is the right way to look at it?
No. These are a bunch of clowns. It's not an organised crime group. This is a bunch of idiots with the keys to somebody else's safe.
My mum was and still is, a very vulnerable single mother. James was a terminally ill, elderly man who really didn't have much time left. And Jordan was a teenager. You know, I feel like other rehabilitation options would have been better for the outcome of this, instead of going through such a harsh trial and getting the prison sentences, given the situations that they were all in.
Do you think their sentences were too heavy?
I was actually surprised they were so low. And the reason is, Parker discovered the keys to the safe and he showed the others how to use it. It was then their own free will to use it as often as they did. Now, what they could have done is they could have stolen little bits infrequently. It's possible nobody would have ever noticed, but they were so greedy, they took so much so quickly that it rang alarm bells and everyone found out.
So when you hear people make the argument that these are people who had not had much and life had dealt them difficult blows time after time, and this was something that came and was in some ways saved them. In fact, I've interviewed some of the people involved who have said exactly that it was a sort of chink of light. You have no sympathy for that argument.
Had they taken enough to feed themselves, to adequately clothe themselves, you could argue that. But when you go into Dubai, when you're buying loads of drugs, use of prostitutes and giving cars away, that is sheer greed.
So, for what it's worth, here's what I think. The law is the law. There is no getting around that. Ultimately, it was criminal. Boys and Parker laundered money through gold and property. They cannot have known this was anything but illegal. But what about everybody else? In meeting so many connected with this story, I have found an awful lot of people who, curiously enough, seem to know very little. They say they never seriously benefited from any of it, and they certainly didn't think to question it much when they did. And all of that can feel very convenient. But then again, it was 2017, when Bitcoin was not as widely understood as it is now. Crypto itself, the people behind it have, let's be honest, been at the very least opaque about what it is and which rules apply to it. It literally exists to be beyond the control of governments and states. And a lot of very rich people have got even richer off that lack of clarity of the Wild West. Is it too credulous to believe that we might have been dealing with a group of people who we know certainly didn't have much, who as far as they could see genuinely believed and understood what they were doing would harm no one? That just this once, they'd found the gold rush, some luck. That the system had, just this once, glitched for them. Do you believe that there's still Bitcoin out there, which the group exploited?
Loads. Roughly 2,500 went missing, and Stephen Boys, through his dodgy gagging agreement, returned about 436. We recovered about 550 from the police side of things. That accounts for almost half of it. And where's the other half?
Do you have any idea where they might be?
I have suspicions.